Welcome into another PFF college football preview show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here, previewing the final weekend of the college football regular season. And Dalton, you look at it right now, the playoff picture, you would think with only 1 week left in the regular season, we know kind of who would be in the playoff. We have no idea who's going to be in the playoff right now, which is why for the first time all season, we are previewing 11 games. We couldn't even fit all of them on the desk right now, so we have two of the games right back here. 11 games that have massive implications on the college football playoff race.
Absolutely, every single one of them. And you're talking about 22 teams in those games, and then who knows what happens elsewhere. There's some games we're not covering today that, you know what, could also have an impact. We saw last week an upset can happen at any time, and that's really, it's kind of defined the season of chaos, hasn't it? It's going to end as chaotic as it started, and these are some fun matchups here.
Really are a lot of fun matchups. Let's go over the records real quick before we get started of what we have so far this season. Dalton, you have a 5-game lead on me now. You are 62-30 on the season. I am 57-35 on the year. I have a lot of ground to make up in order to catch you now.
Yeah. I mean, and then look, it's not like I'm going to mess around here and just give you a window. You better get the ones that we differ on. You better get them right, or you're going to have a problem.
That's the problem, is I keep losing the ones we differ on, unfortunately. But before we start with all of these games, we're going to preview the biggest preview show yet. We got to talk about the PFF subscription sale that's going on right now. 35% off. Dawn, I don't know who okayed this up in the PFF headquarters, but
it's brilliant.
Yeah. You guys are ripping us off right now, so take advantage of it.
You talk about Black Friday. This is as good a Black Friday deal as it gets around here.
Absolutely. So you get it now until Cyber Monday. It's until the Monday after Thanksgiving. 35% off when you use the promo code SCORE35 to get a 35% off your PFF Plus subscription. You get access to all the player grades and premium stats for college football and the NFL, the best fantasy and betting tools on the planet, access to our 2025 NFL mock draft simulator. You could be the GM for your favorite team, or all 32 NFL teams can trade players, can trade picks, and can draft up to the full 7 rounds of the 2025 NFL draft as well, and premium content that's only available with a PFF Plus subscription as well. So again, from now until Cyber Monday, 35% off when you use the promo code SCORE35. So you check it out at pff.com. All right, Dawn, let's get into our first game that we're talking about. That is a Black Friday game between Oklahoma State and Colorado in Boulder, noon Eastern time on ABC. So the playoff implications in this game really are, okay, Colorado's got to win this game and also get some help in order to get to the Big 12 title game and ultimately get to the college football playoff as well, because they lost to Kansas and they no longer control their own destiny in the Big 12 race, and really by proxy the college football playoff race either. So let's look at what Colorado needs to do in order to get to that Big 12 title game. So really, these are the scenarios for them right here, the path. Because I think the important thing to do here for these Big 12 games, we're previewing all 4 of the big ones this week, is just map out how these teams can make it to the Big 12 title games. Ironically, Dawn, nobody controls their own destiny. Not even Arizona State. I mean, even though they pretty much are winning in, there is a scenario where Arizona State wins and still misses the Big 12 title game. But for Colorado, at least, they got to win and BYU to lose and Texas Tech to win. Or win, Arizona State loses and Iowa State loses, or win, Iowa State loses and BYU loses, or win, Arizona State loses and BYU loses. So really, it's 2 of Arizona State, BYU, and Iowa State to lose, or win, BYU loses and Texas Tech wins. Those are the scenarios for Colorado to get into the Big 12 title game. Very complicated, but we wanted to map out every scenario to kind of make it a little more digestible heading into the final weekend.
Yeah, and I think what I like for Colorado here is that they are playing on Friday before everybody else, so they don't need to sit around and scoreboard watch during the game, or I don't think we need to sit here and question their motivation, right? Win the ball game, see what happens on Saturday. If they're in the Big 12 title game, so be it, then they're playing next week. And if they're not, then, well, they lost control of their own destiny last week, right? And they can kind of pin that on themselves for losing to Kansas. But either way, I mean, it's been a really good run. Whether they finish 9-3, regardless of the Big 12 title game, they've had a really good season.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If they get this win anyway, going from 1 win to 4 wins last year to 9 this year, you can see what type of program that Coach Prime is building there. The Big 12 title game would obviously be the goal, but it's out of their own hands now. The only thing they can do is take care of their own business on Friday and then just wait and see what happens the next day.
So So you have the Colorado offense against Oklahoma State in this one. What should we be looking out for when they have the ball?
I just wonder, we have seen, obviously Colorado leans towards the passing game, as anybody would, with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and all the weapons that they have, right? But I wouldn't mind seeing this being a game, and there have been a few this year where they have a little bit of balance, okay? When Colorado has rushed for at least 100 yards, which is not very many, when you look at the scale of other teams running the ball, and some of them go for 300 a game, right? When they run for 100 yards, they're 5-0 and they score 36 points a game. Just a little bit of balance, right? When they're under that, they're 3-3 and they only score right around 28 points a game. And they've scored 28 or less in all three of their losses, in part because they can't run the ball. It's not the only reason they've lost, but they have a hard time sometimes just controlling games and possessing the ball because they're so one-dimensional. Oklahoma State comes into this game dead last in the Power 4 in run defense grade. They have missed the most tackles in run defense, and they allow 5.8 yards per design carry. Again, I'm not suggesting that Colorado should come out in this game and run 60% of the time, but the times where they always have a good offense. Even last week, their offense looked good. They just didn't have the football. The times of the games they've had balance, the Arizona game, a little bit in the UCF game, right? They've been absolutely unstoppable. And if you go, okay, if this team can be two-dimensional with this quarterback and these weapons, Oklahoma State's not stopping them either because they haven't stopped anybody all season. Texas Tech dropped 56 on them last week. So I just wonder if, for one last ride here, and I know it might be a game where they try to inflate the numbers for Travis Hunter a little bit in the Heisman race and they go out there slinging it. It could be this crew's last game together with all the guys going to the Shrine Bowl and going into the draft and all that stuff. They still have to win the football game, though. And I think the best way for them to do that is have just a little bit of balance. I'm not saying you have to go out here and run for 250, 300 yards, but 100 yards seems to be the cutoff, just enough to support the passing game and add a little bit of a wrinkle, maybe a little bit of play action, and Oklahoma State's as vulnerable to that as any team in the country.
Yeah, and Deion Sanders did say today that Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter will be playing in the bowl game. So,
see, that gets interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah, so this probably won't be the last time we see Colorado, those two play for Colorado this year, especially if they don't make the Big 12 title game. But my matchup to watch is really about the run game as well. It's about how does Colorado's run D respond against Ollie Gordon. So really, we talked about it all year, Dalton. And every single preview we've done for Colorado, it seems like we've done almost every preview for Colorado this year for every single game. But one of the biggest reasons that they've had success defensively is their massive improvement in run defense. They're right now 41st in run defense grade. They were 122nd last year. They were one of the worst run defenses in college football. And it looked like that this past Saturday. They got destroyed by Kansas's run game, especially by Devin Neal. The Jayhawks had 332 rushing yards, averaging nearly 6 yards per carry. It was the most rushing yards that any Colorado team has allowed under Deion Sanders, even worse than anything from last year when they had one of the worst in the country last year. So it was really bad last week. Now you go this week against Ollie Gordon, who won the Doak Walker Award last year as the best running back in college football. He's really on a really extremely disappointing season, but it is worth mentioning he's coming off his two best rushing performances. He had 121 yards against TCU. He had 156 yards against Texas Tech. So with a true freshman quarterback, too, that Oklahoma State has under center, the Cowboys are probably going to have to rely on Ollie Gordon a lot in this game, and he is coming off two really good performances as well. Colorado's run defense is going to need to play a lot better against a dangerous running back in Ollie Gordon. He's not the best in the country like it was last year, but still a dangerous running back nonetheless.
Yeah, we know what he's capable of, right? I think that's the idea, and that if you don't play sound in your gaps, and we've seen with Colorado, the two Big 12 games that they've lost, and that's essentially cost them the driver's seat in this race, is the two games that the run defense let them down, right? DJ Giddens for Kansas State and Devin Neal for Kansas, and that's what it was going to be. I've been telling you all season, run defense is going to be a massive key in this Big 12 title race, and it's still going to be. You're going to hear me say it for several of these games, probably all of them actually, I think, is that if you can stop the run in the Big 12, you have a shot to win a Big 12 title. And Colorado, if they do that, can give themselves at least an outside chance to still get there, and again, see what happens on Saturday with the other three games.
So, Dalton, and what could be the final game we preview of the Colorado Buffaloes this year, who will win in this Black Friday game?
I like them to bounce back in front of the home crowd. I've got Colorado 42-24, and I just think they're a better football team than Oklahoma State. Yep. Look, there's nothing wrong with their offense. I know they only scored 21 last week, but that's just because they didn't have the football. There's nothing wrong with their offense. Oklahoma State's defense, I should say, has struggled all season. the defense I think will look better because, again, it's a more straight-up running game. We've talked about this, too, with teams with a lot of the option looks. Oklahoma State's not really one of those teams. They're more of just a more conventional running game. With Ollie Gordon, they're not a great run-blocking team, as you mentioned last year, and that's kind of carried over this year. So I think Oklahoma State could put up some points. The receivers have been really good. You talk about guys like Stribling and Presley who have been good on the outside. And if Gordon's going to get the momentum rolling a little bit here, you still have to be aware of him, right? He's got the speed to score from anywhere on the field. We saw it all year last year. We've seen it recently. But I like Colorado. Give me the Buffaloes 42-24.
I have Colorado also scoring 42 points. I have Oklahoma State scoring 21 points in this game. I think Shedeur Sanders against a really struggling Oklahoma State defense is a big game, and I think Colorado bounces back from its loss to Kansas. So they win this game, and obviously they turn their attention to Saturday and hope some chaos happens in the Big 12 that would send Colorado to the Big 12 title game. But Dawn, I just want to real quick before we move on to the next game, I just want to thank the Colorado faithful out there, honestly, because if this is the final Colorado game that we do this year, I just want to thank them, dude. It's been unreal what that fan base has done for our show. You know, they've been a big part of us kind of smashing any expectation that we had for our show this year. So a lot of other fan bases have been a big part of that as well. I'm not taking away from them, but Colorado, every single video we put on Colorado seems to do very well, and the comment section is always amazing looking at with all the Colorado fans. So just want to shout them out too because they've been amazing for our show this year.
It's certainly been a fun season to cover them with everything, and it's going to be a fun draft to cover this.
Oh yeah, we're not done with Colorado content this year. No, absolutely not.
And now they got themselves a 5-star true freshman quarterback coming next year. That momentum, Deion's building the momentum there. I think I personally I have a feeling he's staying. I know there's a lot of NFL talk, but I'm with you. I think he's staying. I think it's going to continue to be fun going into.
Julian Lewis does not go to Colorado unless he knows Deion Sanders is staying.
I would think so. Yeah.
So I think that he's definitely staying, honestly. So yeah, shout out to them. And yes, we are not done because once we turn our attention to the NFL draft, you're talking Travis Hunter, maybe number 1 overall pick, and Shedeur Sanders, maybe the number 1 quarterback in the NFL draft too. Maybe 2 top 5 picks at Colorado. So we'll be talking about those 2 and a lot of other guys a lot more as the NFL draft process wears on. But shout out to Colorado faithful for what they've done for us all year. All right, next game we're talking about, Dalton. Getting to the Saturday slate, we got South Carolina at Clemson. It's a noon Eastern time game on ESPN. The playoff implications are both teams are still alive for an at-large bid when nobody really thought so going into last weekend at least. So neither of them are in the playoff at the moment, but that can certainly change because right now, at least in the AP poll, we're recording this before the college football playoff rankings drop tonight, but in the AP poll, there are 2 of the first 4 teams out, and the winner of this game might only need 1 or 2 of the current at-large teams to slip up in order to take over and get into the field with a major win like this one to end their season. Obviously, of the 2, Clemson is more likely to receive the bid. Right now, I think they're the higher ranked team in the AP poll at least, and they only have 2 losses while South Carolina has 3 losses. And also, there's also a chance that Clemson could get an automatic qualifying bid as the ACC champion, but they would need Miami to lose to Syracuse, a game that we'll preview a little bit. They would need that to happen, and no matter what happens, Clemson could lose to South Carolina and still make the ACC title game because this is not a conference game, obviously. So that could be an avenue for Clemson. South Carolina, their only avenue is getting in as an at-large team, but they've been red hot recently, winning their last 5 games after starting 3-3 on the season. Their conversation is very interesting because Alabama and Ole Miss are also fighting for for the last few spots, and they both beat South Carolina this year and also have 3 losses. So they have the same record as South Carolina and the head-to-head advantage over South Carolina. But South Carolina's been a little hotter than those 2 teams have so far in the last few weeks as well. So it's weird. If South Carolina wins this game, obviously it's a major win for them. Maybe they can jump 1 or 2 of those and get into it. But it's a little weird for South Carolina. So we'll see what happens at the very end of it. But this would be a big game for them to move up even further in the ranking.
Their 3 losses, though, are a little bit different than those of Alabama or a team like Ole Miss, right? Their 3 losses are a very close game to LSU, a very close game to Alabama, and they did get dominated by Ole Miss. That was the worst game they played all season. But South Carolina, here's what I can tell you. I think, 1, how much is it, what have you done for me lately? And like you mentioned, they've been raging hot during this 5-game win streak. And 2, I'm going to tell you something. Whoever is at home in the playoffs in that first round, this might be the team they do not want to see because they're extremely talented. They have one of the best defenses in the country that can play, and they can play with and stop anybody. And their offense is getting better and better every single week. Lenora Sellers getting better. They can run the football. They got some young weapons who are starting to get it going. I think South Carolina, if they were to get in, would be a team that no one wants to play. They have a ton of talent.
They have a lot of talent, especially defensively, which I'll talk about in just a second, Dalton. But you have the South Carolina offense in this game with Lenora Sellers playing a lot better recently. So what should we be looking out for when they have the ball?
He is. So there's a handful of things that are making this passing game better, because earlier in the year, this team was about playing elite defense and running the football with Sellers and with Rocket Sanders, right? The passing game has slowly gotten better the last 5 weeks. And yes, South Carolina fans, I absolutely hear you. Lenora Sellers is playing better lately. He's getting better. I know. He's making better decisions under pressure. I think he's taking less unnecessary deep shots. I think you're just seeing a guy who's getting a little bit more comfortable, especially with the speed of the SEC game. But a second thing I want to focus on here, along with Sellers, is South Carolina making his life a little bit easier, right? I think the screen game has gotten a lot better as the year has gone on, and this is what I want to show you. Max, their first 7 games of the year, they were outside the top 100 in yards after catch per reception, all right? The last 4 weeks, they're first. Their receivers are first in yards after catch per reception, first in yards after contact, first in missed tackles, and this team is creating right now, the last 4 weeks, the 7th highest rate of explosive passes in the country, okay? They don't throw it a ton. It's right around actually 50-50 run and pass. They're still a balanced team, but their weapons are doing a terrific job. It's Rocket Sanders out of the backfield. Josh Simon at tight end is on an absolute burner. Yeah. Nick Harbor's a good player. DeLayvin Campbell. They've got weapons now who are making things happen after the catch. Okay, and what that's doing is allowing Lenora Sellers not to have to chuck it downfield, right? I honestly think his skill set, when I watched him, earlier in the season, is a little bit like Jalen Milroe, where it's a lot of home runs and running the football and taking shots downfield. Well, right now, I think he's doing better taking easier throws, 15 yards and under, and allowing these athletes to work in space, and then taking shots when they're actually there in single coverage, slot fades, corner routes, and one-on-one, things like that. There's a better balance in this offense right now, but I think a big part of it is this core of weapons making things happen after the catch, and the play calling being just a little more conservative and waiting on the home run balls. It's a balanced offense right now, and they're getting extremely dangerous, and Sellers is running it very, very well.
It's amazing that they are the best in the country over the last few weeks in terms of yards after catch. When they lost, their best yak receiver seemed like in Juice Wells going over to Ole Miss, and yet they're still destroying it after the catch.
And they did struggle, like I mentioned, the earlier part of the season. They were, in all of those categories, they were outside the top 100 in the country. It was really bad. They did not make plays after the catch, and all of a sudden they're just doing it at an elite level.
That probably has to do with Lenora Sellers just chucking it so much in the early part of the season, right? Because obviously when you're throwing it deep downfield, it's hard to get yards after the catch. Whereas now, like you said, he's being more conservative now. That now you can get more yards.
And he's done a much better job of taking checkdowns as opposed to earlier in the year. The first half of the season, he had this panic in the pocket, and I think his passing grade under pressure was under a 30. And right now, it's in the 60s, which actually under pressure is pretty good. He's making better decisions under pressure and late in the plays, taking checkdowns. If Sanders is open underneath on a swing when he doesn't see his first read or two, okay, so be it. Let them work after the catch. I think he's done a much better job of just taking positive plays, and his receivers are allowing that elite production to happen. I look at something like the game-winning play against Missouri, the shovel screen to Sanders. That's it right there. Better screen game, better after the catch, and then their more traditional passing set, Sellers is making better decisions.
Yeah, so my matchup to watch on the other side of the ball against one of the best defenses in America is, all right, can Clemson establish the run in this game? Because to put it simply, South Carolina's pass defense has been basically impenetrable this year. Right now, the Gamecocks are third in the nation in defensive grade on passing plays with a 92.8 mark. They are second in pass rushing grade behind Michigan and seventh in coverage grade this year. Cade Klubnik, I will give him credit, has improved dramatically as a passer. He's an 86.7 passing grade this year, 63.9 last year. But it's unlikely that Clemson can win this game off of his arm alone. They could have some success in the run game. Now, South Carolina's run D is still pretty good. It's not really a weakness. They're right now 37th in EPA per run allowed. But it is the one area where opposing offenses have been able to find some success this year. 2 weeks ago against Missouri, they allowed Nate Noel to run for 150 yards on them, with 78 coming before contact. Before contact, 78 yards. Over half of his yards came before contact in that game. I will say Missouri has a really, really damn good run-blocking offensive line. They are 7th in the nation in run-blocking grade this year. Clemson is about average. They're 68th right now. But between Phil Maffa and Cade Klubnik as well, the quarterback, Clemson's run game is pretty dangerous. Right now, Maffa is 4th in the ACC with 1,012 rushing yards. Klubnik is 3rd among ACC quarterbacks with 460 yards on the ground. If they can establish the run on early downs, it puts less pressure on Klubnik to have a game of his life against what's an elite pass rush and an elite secondary as well. I think the run game for Clemson is critical in this one because against South Carolina and their D-line and their pass rush and that secondary, I don't know if any quarterback can have a great day against them. And Cade Klubnik, like I said, has been a lot better, but I just can't see Clemson winning off his arm. I think they need the run game with him and Phil Maffa to really be working in this game.
Totally agree. There may not be a more dangerous team in the country on defense in obvious passing situations than the Gamecocks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible. The level of talent on the defensive line, Dylan Stewart, Tonka Hemingway, Kyle Kennard, TJ Sanders, Brian Thomas Jr. I mean,
those were all NFL players.
All of them NFL
and
players.
Nick Manwari back there.
O'Donnell Fortune and guys like that on the back end. It's a stacked defense. I firmly believe it's one of the 3 best defenses in the country. I really do. I think Ohio State, Texas, and South Carolina, that's the 3 for me. Notre Dame's creeping up too in that mix. But South Carolina, this is an elite defense. I don't think Clemson's seen anything like it this year.
No, absolutely not. So, Dalton, in a game that is surprisingly massive for the college football playoff at-large race, who will win this game?
I'm going to tell you something about Clemson. Okay. They have faced 4 teams that we would consider through our pass rush grades an above-average Power 4 pass rush. Okay. Georgia got blown out. Louisville got blown out. Pitt almost lost.
Yep.
And Virginia Tech, they won that game by 10 points, but Clemson didn't score until after halftime in that game. If you can rush the passer against Clemson, you got a very good chance of beating them. And there's not many teams, if any, that can rush the passer better than South Carolina. Mm-hmm. I like their defense in this game. I like the momentum they have going on offense. Clemson's defense is good, but I don't think it's as elite as we thought it would be or as it's been in past years. I really like, even on the road, South Carolina in this game, and I think their defense and their pass rush is going to bother Cade Klubnik a lot. I've got the Gamecocks 28-20.
Yeah, Louisville had the 13th. Right now has the 13th best pass rushing grade. South Carolina, I misspoke, is 3rd behind Michigan and Mississippi, Ole Miss. So that's the kind of company that South Carolina is in right now. It's an elite pass rush. I also have South Carolina win this game 27-17. I think the Tigers really struggle to get anything going offensively against South Carolina's defense. And I think South Carolina wraps up its regular season with a 6th straight win. So I know South Carolina, Dalton, is the underdog right now. And I was hoping to make up a game on you by differing on you in this, but I think we're both in line here that I think South Carolina's going to win this game, even though they're 3-point underdogs.
Well, a 2.5, 3-point underdog when you're on the road essentially means the game is a pick 'em, right? And I think I just think South Carolina, this defense, you have to be special on offense to score on this team. And look, Clemson's got a good offense they've shown against some of, especially a lot of the weaker teams on their schedule. But I still look back at that Louisville game that I thought they were going to win, and now they got just utterly dominated in that game. I'm a little worried that Clemson can play with a defense that plays at this level week in and week out.
Yeah, so South Carolina staying alive in the at-large race of the win. And Clemson still technically alive in the college football playoff race, even with a loss, because all they need then is Miami to lose to Syracuse, and Clemson is playing SMU in the ACC title game for an automatic spot as well. So not dead yet for Clemson, even if they lose this game. South Carolina cannot afford a loss, though, obviously, in that one. All right, another noon game, Dawn, is the biggest rivalry, arguably, in college football. Michigan at Ohio State, noon Eastern time on Fox. The playoff implications. So Ohio State is already in. They're already in the college football playoff. But they need to beat Michigan in order to secure a trip to the Big Ten championship game. So they're right now 10-1. They've beaten Penn State and they've beaten Indiana. Their only loss was to Oregon by 1 point at Oregon as well. But if Ohio State wins, they go to Indianapolis for the Big Ten title game in a rematch with Oregon. And then if they win that, they'll most likely be the number 1 team in the country entering the college football playoff. But even with a second loss to the Ducks, I would still say Ohio State's probably going to be like the number 5 seed in the college football playoff right now, which means then it would need to right now beat the Big 12 champion and then potentially Boise State in order to make the Final Four. So the 5 seed is a very, very coveted seed right now in the college football playoff.
Unless, just throwing this out there, unless it's South Carolina sitting there at 12. And that's a team, again, I would even if I'm Ohio State, I would.
With that O-line beat up the way it is, yeah, that could be a problem.
Unless, I think the seeding is going to be real interesting depending on the results of a lot of these games here, too.
But losing, if Ohio State does lose to Michigan for the fourth straight time, which, by the way, has not happened to Ohio State since the early 1990s, that would mean they likely concede their spot in the Big Ten title game to either Penn State or Indiana. So yes, Ohio State beat both those teams, but it would be a second conference loss for Ohio State, whereas Penn State and Indiana right now only have one conference loss, and Penn State plays Maryland, Indiana plays Purdue. Very unlikely that both those teams also lose those games as well. So they would drop down out of the Big Ten championship game and would drop down in the rankings as well and still be an at-large team, but they would be lower in the seeding than where they are right now, which is the 5 seed. So yes, Ohio State's in the playoff right now, but this is a big game for determining whether or not they can get to the Big Ten championship game and eventually maybe even be the number one team in the country heading into the college football playoff. But Dawn, you have the Michigan offense in this game. What should we be looking out for when they play maybe the best defense in college football?
Well, we're on our 12th game of this, and we've probably covered, half of the Michigan games, I'd say, somewhere around there, probably 5 or 6 of them, and the song remains the same. Michigan needs to run the football because they have struggled to throw it all year, and I believe you mentioned to me that Colston Loveland's status is up in the air. This game?
It's up in the air. Yeah, I think he's going to play, they said. It's most likely he's going to play, but he is up in the air.
Or whether he's banged up or especially if he's out, throwing the football is not going to be what the Wolverines want to do here. They want to run the ball with Kalel Mullings, with Donovan Edwards. In their 6 wins, they averaged 212 rushing yards, excluding sacks, because we do it right around here. And in their 5 losses, they've averaged 122. When they run the football, they can control the game and allow their defense to win it and do all of that. The problem is Ohio State is probably the best run defense that they've played all season. And you're talking about a team with a 93.5 run defense grade. And somehow that's only the 5th best in the country. That's incredible. 3.9 yards per carry they've allowed. That's the 6th best in the country. Less than a yard per carry before contact. Okay, this defensive line, we've talked about it all year. These are 2 of the best defensive lines in the country. But Ohio State's unit with Jack Sawyer, with Tyleik Williams, with JT to him all the while. Then you got Cody Simon at linebacker behind him making plays. Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom. Lathan Ransom, especially against the run, has been incredible this year. You've got just a primetime matchup of a team that really, really wants and needs to run the ball against an elite middle of this defense for Ohio State that's been stuffing teams all year in the middle. It's just an incredible unit they have right now from front to back. We've seen it a couple of times in person. All 3 layers of this defense have just done a fantastic job this year. They very well could be the best defense in the country, and their run defense will get tested by this Michigan offense that really needs to run the ball to have any chance in this game.
Yeah, and in every Michigan preview, it's always, all right, can Michigan run the ball? And then the other side of the ball is, all right, Michigan's defensive line, which has been arguably the best in America so far, can they take over this game? And again, I hate to do it one more time, but that's what we're talking about here with Michigan's defensive line. Because you just look at what they've done this year, Dawn, their defensive line, the best passers grade in the country, 3rd best run defense grade in the country, at a 91.6 overall grade, the 2nd highest graded defensive line in the nation, only behind Ole Miss. And you just look at what they've had on the defensive line right now. All 4 of their defensive line starters are on the PFF big board right now for the NFL draft. 2 of them are first-round prospects in the defensive tackles, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And you just look at the grading for Michigan this year. Really, the only thing going right for them is the defensive line. They're 1st in passers grade, like I said, 3rd in run defense grade. Passing grade, 122nd. Rushing grade, 67th. Even the rushing grade is average in college football this year. Receiving, 105th. Pass blocking grade, 85th. Run blocking grade, 56th. Coverage grade, 81st. Everything is average or well below average or among the worst in the country besides the defensive line. The defensive line is still playing at a national championship level with superstars on that defensive line. And Ohio State's offensive line is easily the team's biggest question mark right now because they've lost 2 of their best starters in left tackle Josh Simmons, who's currently a first-round prospect on PFF's big board right now, and center Seth McLaughlin. They're both out for the season with injuries. And since week 7, which is when Josh Simmons got hurt against Oregon, they have a 60.7 offensive line grade. That is 104th in college football right now. If Michigan has any chance of keeping this game close at all, it will be because this defensive line for Michigan dominates Ohio State's offensive line. And when your offensive line can't block for you, I don't care how talented your quarterback is, how talented your running backs are, how talented your receivers are. It's really hard to do anything offensively if your offensive line is getting beat every single play.
Correct. And I actually thought when we saw Ohio State play Indiana last week, I thought Indiana did a pretty nice job, especially stopping the run. I thought their defensive line played reasonably well, and then they just ran out of gas when their offense wasn't doing anything. But, the guy I'm looking at in this game is their center now. He was Carson Hinsman, who was the starting center for Ohio State last year. This year he was a backup. Now with McLaughlin hurt, he's back to the starting center role, getting a rematch. Kind of struggled, understandably, in this game last season. That's a guy against Graham and Grant on the inside that I'm looking at who's going to have to be effective. But I think we've seen for stretches this year where Ohio State has looked their best when they distribute the ball to the outside quickly, right? Get out on the perimeter and let the athletes win in space. Because of these offensive line issues, I don't think they've run the ball between the tackles quite as well as we thought they would going into the season, especially lately. So it is going to be a big factor. How do they choose to control this pass rush? And even in the run game, is Ohio State going to be able to run between the tackles, or are they going to have to get creative and get to the outside? And, last week against Indiana, we saw them run a little outside zone, get out to the edge. Yep. We've seen them do some jet sweeps and even run some screens as an extension of it. So I'm curious to see how Ohio State handles this, because it's going to be a story with every game that they play from here in. It's just how are they going to pass protect? How are they going to block between the tackles? It's going to be a big thing, especially on that left side of the line.
Yeah, it's no longer about can Will Howard win the national title. It's about the offensive line now. That's the big question for Ohio State against arguably the best defensive line in the country, at least the second best right now in defensive line grade. So, all right, Dalton. A lot of Ohio State fans would say beating Michigan is more important than even winning a national title. Will they beat Michigan, or will, for the fourth straight year, will the Wolverines take down the Buckeyes?
I think the Buckeyes, they buck the trend. I have them. I have Ohio State 35-13, and I just think look. I know Michigan scored 50 last week on Northwestern, and a lot of that. Well, they played Northwestern, right? Ohio State, take out the Oregon game. They gave up 32 points in that game. In all of their other games, they're giving up less than 9 points a game.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
It's the only game.
Yeah.
I mean, they're giving up less than 9 points a game. We saw against Penn State, they gave up 6 points offensively to Penn State. Last week, they gave up 15, but the second touchdown was late in the game when it was over, right? Ohio State, this might be the best defense in the country, and Michigan, for most of the year, has struggled to score more than maybe 24 points in a handful of games, and obviously the Northwestern game last week skews some of the numbers, but I have a hard time seeing how Michigan's going to consistently score. If they're going to find a way to win this game, it's going to be like 17-13. But I don't think it's happening. I think Ohio State's going to finally get their revenge after the last 3 years, 35-13.
Yeah, I struggle to see Michigan scoring 20 points in this game. I have a 34-10 Ohio State winning it right now. I think Ohio State's defense, like you said, is playing like the best in America. Michigan's offense has like nothing really going for it, especially if Colson Loveland is out, and I think he'll play.
And I think there's a statement to be made that the last 3 years Michigan has won this game because they were the more physical team.
Yeah,
I think Ohio State's going to want to make a statement that it's not. That's not the case this time.
There's a lot of Ohio State players that want to make a statement. I've seen a lot of,
and like you mentioned, the stakes here. It's not like there's not any stakes as far as the Big Ten goes. They need to win this game to get to face Oregon and win a Big Ten title. So it's also extremely an important game, not just for the pageantry, but for what's in front of them as well.
And get a first round bye. And I know there's some Ohio State fans saying, "Well, I want the 5 seed anyways." It was like you're not getting a 5 seed if you lose to Michigan either. So it's like you need to win this game, period, in order to do it. And I think they will. I think they'll dominate Michigan in this game and win by multiple scores. I think 34-10 was my predicted final score in the game between Ohio State and Michigan. All right, another noon game. We got Tennessee at Vanderbilt on ESPN. Playoff implications, basically win or go home for Tennessee. So the Volunteers' playoff chances, Dawn, were looking pretty slim entering this past weekend. They were 8-2, but they were behind some other 2-loss SEC teams like Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M in terms of really their playoff chances. I know they're ahead of A&M in the standings, but A&M, if they won the SEC, obviously would get in over Tennessee. But all three of Alabama, Ole Miss, and A&M were upset on Saturday, which put the Volunteers firmly into the 12-team playoff. If Tennessee can win on the road over what is a dangerous Vanderbilt team, it pretty much locks up an at-large playoff spot. But if Vanderbilt pulls it off against Tennessee, then all of a sudden you see a team like Alabama re-jump Tennessee, or Ole Miss re-jump Tennessee as well. It's a very interesting conversation to be had, and I think it really is win or go home for the Volunteers.
Yeah, I agree. I think a third loss, and especially if the last one is to a 6-5 Vanderbilt team, because you're seeing Alabama get kind of punished for that right now, or we may see that in tonight's rankings. Look, it's obviously a tougher game than it seems on the surface. This is not your usual Vanderbilt team. This is a good team that's played competitive ball all year. They have a dangerous offense with Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers and everything they do schematically, right? And it's a rivalry game, right? And usually it's a one-sided rivalry, but don't think that Vanderbilt isn't wicked motivated for this game, because if this is Diego Pavia's last regular season ride in Vanderbilt, I know he's got the eligibility thing he's dealing with on the side, but this is another statement that he would want to make. On top of already beating Alabama when they were number one, beating Tennessee, that would go down in some lore here for Vanderbilt.
And I know there's a lot of Tennessee fans, and maybe even our producer Eli back there saying, well, wait a minute, we beat Alabama. Why would Alabama jump us? Well, Alabama was already ahead of you when you both had 2 losses too. So I think you lose this game and Alabama beats Auburn, Alabama would again be. Would you agree that Alabama would be above Tennessee again, probably in the ranking?
I think they would. It would still probably be tight, but again, we're looking at, you've talked about this, looking at the entire resume here, right? And I think especially Alabama's win over Georgia then gives them a different perspective there when we just saw Tennessee lose to Georgia. But no, for sure, it's a very important game, I think, and the fact that if they lose this game, they could very well be out, because these 3-loss teams in the SEC, if you're one of them, you're very much riding a fine line of getting in or out.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the last game before the playoff. They don't play in the SEC title game either, so this is really the last chance to impress the committee to get into the playoff. But if they win, they will be in the playoff as well. So, Dalton, you have the Tennessee offense, though, in this game. What should we be looking out for with Nico Iamaleava and the Volunteers on the ball?
Okay, so since week 8, Nico's been, I think, a lot better at, much like I mentioned with Lenora Sellers earlier, taking the throws that aren't just home run balls all the time. I feel like I've talked about this with half the SEC quarterbacks this year, but it's the truth. You can't just throw deep balls and expect to win, right? And since week 8, all right, Max, here's a stat for you. 111 FBS quarterbacks have thrown at least 20 intermediate passes, all right, 10 to 19 air yards. Nico Iamaleava leads those 111 guys with a 93.9 passing grade, okay? This is a big difference to me in their offense. He's gotten better at making the throws that move the sticks, right? Not the home run balls, the deep balls. Well, we know he's got the great arm and all the tools and all that. But these intermediate throws are what sets up those shots. And when he's hitting them, seams down the middle, deep slant routes, stop routes at 12 to 15 yards, right? These are the things that make defensive backs come up, because what you're talking about earlier in the season when it was just go balls and deep posts and that's all he could throw, which, Tennessee is famous for that sort of thing. Josh Heupel likes to throw those things, but teams start sitting back further and further and further back, right? And that's great if you want to run the football, but you can't force your way into those coverages, not till you start making these sorts of throws. He's at 24 of his last 40 intermediate throws. And what this does, especially against this Vanderbilt team, I think the best part of the Vanderbilt defense is their safeties, right?
Yeah.
C.J. Taylor, who we've talked about a lot, and DeRicky Wright, who's a really good player back there, okay? Vanderbilt struggles with their linebackers, okay? And that's when you start talking about this intermediate range. Their linebackers rank 109th in the country in coverage grade. This is where they have the most issues in their zone coverages, defending at the second level around and behind their linebackers, the exact throws that Nico's been making lately. So I'm looking for a couple of things, okay? Obviously, they're going to run the ball with Dylan Sampson. And if they run the ball 50 times and that's what works and wins them a game, cool. But if they need to throw the football, I'm looking for the run game to get these linebackers to step up a little bit, and then these intermediate throws that Nico has been making the last 5-6 weeks, then to get the safeties creeping up just a little bit, then we work the series and we work it over the top and rinse and repeat, right? But it's the fact that Nico is making the intermediate throws at or around the sticks is what's opening up this pass game just a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And really the pass game for Vanderbilt is what I'm going to talk about right now, because Diego Pavia and really an improved receiving core with Eli Stowers after coming in and playing at one of the best tight ends in college football, they've really improved their passing game from what it was a pretty bad one last year. Right now, the Commodores are 17th in EPA per pass. They were 100th in 2023. But there's still one area where they really struggle, and that's along the offensive line. Right now, Dalton, they have the 8th worst pass blocking grade in the country with a 49.8 mark, third worst in the Power 4. They've allowed a pressure on 40.6% of their dropbacks. That's the seventh highest rate in college football. Diego Pavia has a 90.6 passing grade when kept clean, only a 56.1 passing grade when he's under pressure. And right now, you look at the offensive line, it's not only pass protection that they struggle in, it's the run game as well. Right now, Vanderbilt is averaging 4.3 yards per carry. That's 113th in the nation. So the offensive line, in terms of letting up a lot of pressures and not really creating a lot of holes in the run game, has been a big reason why Vanderbilt's offense has sputtered at times, even with a really good quarterback in Diego Pavia, even with a really good receiving core with Eli Stowers leading the way there as well. And against Tennessee's defensive line, that could be a big issue because Tennessee right now has one of the best D-lines in the country. They allow just 3.6 yards per carry. That's tied for the fewest in the nation alongside Oklahoma. They have an 81.9 pass rushing grade and a 37% pressure rate. Each of those numbers are top 20 in the country as well. James Pierce Jr., their edge defender, projected top 15 pick in the 2025 NFL draft. Omar Norman Lott, their defensive tackle, going to the Senior Bowl. We actually have an interview with Jim Nagy. I didn't say at the top. We have an interview with the executive director of the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, at the very end of this episode as well. But Omar Norman Lott going to the Senior Bowl, right now a top 50 prospect on our big board for the 2025 NFL draft as well. So it's a bad offensive line for Vanderbilt against one of the best D-lines in the country in Tennessee. I think if Vanderbilt wants any success offensively, they've got to perform a lot better against what is one of the best D-lines in the country.
Absolutely. And since that Alabama game where they dropped 40 points on them, all right, in their 6 games after that, they're averaging 18 points a game. That's the reason. Their run game especially, and the fact that they can't pass protect for very long, has now become a problem in the second half of the season. It's why they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. They are just not scoring at the same rate that they did the first half of the season. So I'm with you. I think that's concern number 1 against a front 7 that's honestly been elite all year. It's been the most consistent part of Tennessee's entire team.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dalton, for Tennessee, they got to win to make the college football playoff, and if they lose, they're most likely not making the college football playoff. So will Vanderbilt spoil another team's season in the SEC, or will the Volunteers survive?
So the rivalry factor does worry me a little bit here, and the Diego Pavia magic, maybe he's got one more trick up his sleeve. It could be a problem, but I do think that matchup you just mentioned of Tennessee's defensive line against Vanderbilt's offensive line, look, many games are won in the trenches, and I think this is one where that's going to be the case. I think Tennessee, same formula. They play great defense. You get Dylan Sampson rolling. You get Nico to make enough throws. That's how it's been lately, and I think that's going to work. I have Tennessee 27-17. Unless Vanderbilt has some serious improvement up their sleeve on offense, I just have a hard time seeing how they're going to score too many points. We've seen this now for 6 weeks, that they've been struggling to put drives together because of this offensive line.
Yeah, I got Tennessee winning 31-17. I think the defensive line for Tennessee will dominate the Vanderbilt mediocre, not even mediocre, bad offensive line they've had this year. Then I think Nico Iamaleava and Dylan Sampson as well, who was just snubbed for a lot of people for the Doak Walker Award for being a finalist. A lot of people thought he should have been a finalist. He might have something to say in this final game of the regular season against Vanderbilt, and really a below average Vanderbilt defense as well. So Volunteers win this game and clinch a spot in the college football playoff, which I know Eli will be very excited about going into that college football playoff. But let's get to some 3:30 games now, done with the noon slate. Notre Dame at USC, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS. Playoff implications. So Notre Dame pretty much is locked in, I would say, even if it lost to USC. I would imagine they would host a game if they win. Maybe they're eliminated with a loss. I don't think they would be at 10-2, but it's a conversation.
It would be close.
It would be really close.
It would be very close because they have wins over A&M and Army. That's really what they're sitting on.
And I think they're number 5 in the AP poll right now, so it would be like falling from 5. I know we'll see what the playoff rankings
they would maybe even be in that very last spot.
Yeah, that's why
it's not a ton of great wins there.
And it's also because Notre Dame, they don't play in a conference, so they can't have a automatic bid. They have to fight for an at-large spot, one of the 7 at-large spots as well. A 10-2 Notre Dame would likely still make the 12-team field, but it's not guaranteed. They obviously lost in Northern Illinois. That's worse than any other playoff contenders lost this year. But they do have 2 really nice wins in Texas A&M and Army as well this past week, and Army's still a ranked team to make up for it. Beating USC would guarantee Notre Dame is hosting a first-round playoff game. But the loss from Notre Dame would, like I said, push them to the brink of elimination.
Serious danger.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's another case where, let's say South Carolina got a big win at Clemson, and you're talking about for that last spot between those two. I think you'd have you a debate.
And South Carolina also killed Texas A&M, the team that Notre Dame also beat, which that's their big win.
So you've got that head-to-head, plus they'll be coming off a Clemson win. I mean, I think Notre Dame would be very much in danger if they mess around and lose this game.
I don't know if they would be left out. It would be a far way to fall for number 5 all the way out after 1 week, but I don't know. It's a weird one. It's a very weird one. I think, obviously, be safe. You just win this game, and you're guaranteed to host a game, though, in the first round of the playoff. But, Dawn, you have the USC offense who's made a change at quarterback from our guy, Miller Moss, who we interviewed. You can check out that interview. He's a great guy. But they've made a change from him to Jaden Maiava now as their new starting quarterback. So what should we be looking out for when he and the Trojans in the ball?
Yeah, usually I go with the complicated stuff and find schemes and all that. Let's just face it, Notre Dame is really darn good on defense, right? And Jaden Maiava, he was the starter for the most part at UNLV last year. Didn't start the first 2 games, but started the rest of the way and got them into the Mountain West title game. Had an okay season, kind of was the beneficiary of a lot of his mistakes not being turned into interceptions. Actually, the second most dropped interceptions in the country last year. And this is what I'm worried about with Maiava. Now, USC's game plan, they're going to run the ball with Woody Marks. And I think it's going to be a lot of the conservative stuff that Lincoln Riley has in his offense. A lot of quick balls to the flat, a lot of screens. I think a lot of what you saw in the first half against Penn State when they got the ball quick to the outside and they made Penn State kind of chase them and make open field tackles. They're going to see a lot of that. But if they get behind the chains, down in distance, right, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, things like that, can Maiava just avoid big mistakes? Because this is not a defense you want to make big mistakes again. Last year, 24 turnover-worthy plays, even though he didn't start the first 2 games of the season, 4th most in the country. His 5.9% turnover-worthy play rate was the highest in the country last year of any quarterback with 250 attempts. His first start against Nebraska this year, 2 weeks ago, 3 turnover-worthy plays. Last week against UCLA, didn't have any. Okay, cool. They won a low-scoring game against UCLA, but you can't make these mistakes against a Notre Dame team that's 2nd in the country in coverage grade. They have the 6th most interceptions. It's an elite unit. Even without Benjamin Morrison, they've continued to be an elite coverage unit. It is one of the hardest defenses to line up and throw the ball against, and I'm telling you right now, USC is going to want to stay ahead of the chains. I mean, you're talking about Xavier Watts back there, ball hawking. Leonard Moore has been good on the outside. You got a good pass rush up front. It's just one of these things where USC, again, down in distance. Don't make Maiava throw it down the field too often against this defense because there are times when he is very mistake prone.
Yeah, he's had some issues this year as well. And USC has had some issues in their run defense, which is a big problem, Dawn, against an elite rushing attack that Notre Dame has because their offense is really centered around that ground game. Only Miami has a higher rushing grade and higher EPA per run than Notre Dame among Power 4 schools so far this year. And the Fighting Irish are 5th in the Power 4 with a 75.8 run blocking grade. They are 2nd in the Power 4 in yards per carry. 3 different players have at least 500 rushing yards this year. And Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and the quarterback, Riley Leonard. So it's not like it's just Ashton Ginty, like Boise State or anything like that. They have a 3-headed monster in that backfield with Price, Love, and obviously Riley Leonard as well. USC's defense is only 89th in run defense grade this year with a 76.9 mark. They've allowed fewer than 100 rushing yards just twice this year, Utah State and Maryland. Not necessarily the toughest competition there against those two. So the only times this year where they allowed fewer than 100 rushing yards were those 2 schools. And Dawn, they're missing some key players in their front 7. Edge defender Anthony Lucas is done for the season with a lower body injury. Defensive tackle Bear Alexander and linebacker Eric Gentry both opted out of the remainder of the season as well. They have not faced a rushing attack as potent as Notre Dame's either. So stopping the run needs to be the point of emphasis for USC this week. But you look at it right now, like I said, they're 89th in run defense grade, and they have not played a rushing attack nearly as good as Notre Dame's. That could be a big problem for the Trojans on Saturday.
I have to respect Notre Dame for embracing their identity here with Riley Leonard because they don't have, first of all, they don't have a plethora of great receivers, if any. Plus, Leonard is not exactly, he's talented, but he's not exactly the type of guy you want dropping back throwing the ball 45 times a game, right? They want to run the football, including with him. He's a really good athlete and a really tough runner, right? I mean, he can make those plays, and then he can work off play action 20 to 25 times a game, right? Especially with their defense. I think it can be very much a ball control offense and then allow your defense to make stops and just grind teams down down in a physical manner, right? And I think Leonard does. His feet give them a dimension that Sam Hartman didn't give them last year. Hartman, a more traditional pocket passer, whereas Leonard being the third factor and the option factor in this offense has made him really dangerous. And I think it is a problem, especially if you don't have all your horses on the defensive line. It's a serious problem going up against this Irish offense.
It always reminds me a little bit of like the Florida offense back in the day with Tim Tebow, right? With a power run game with the quarterback and all that. Every time I watch, I get flashbacks to like the 07, 08 Florida teams with like the quarterback run. And obviously Tebow could throw the ball a little bit as well, but a lot of play action. That's where he made his money. It's kind of what Riley Leonard is doing right now as well for the Fighting Irish a little bit, it feels like to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's going to be the first problem. We've said it all year. If you can get Notre Dame in obvious passing situations, you stand a chance.
Yeah.
But that's a major if, because they are constantly ahead of the chains. And honestly, especially you see Jeremiah Love with explosive runs left and right. It's a problem. It's problem number one. If you don't stop the run against Notre Dame, they're going to dictate the pace.
Remember Jeremiah Love last week? What he had 7 touches for 140 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
That was his stat line.
Hurdling people and cutting back and doing all that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just there's times for this Notre Dame run game right now where it just looks way too easy.
He averaged like 20 yards per touch against Army and half a touchdown per touch against Army as well. That's a good day.
It's good enough.
It's a good day for the running back.
Job done.
Yeah, he's a really good player, and we'll talk about him for next year as well. But Dalton, ultimately, will Notre Dame clinch a first-round home playoff game, or will USC upset them and push the Fighting Irish to the brink of elimination?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I think this game is about down and distance. And for Notre Dame, obviously, they want to keep running the football. And I think for their defense, you want to stop Woody Marks, right? Because he's had some really good days this year. He's got 1,100 yards this year. Woody Marks has had a really nice year transferring over from Mississippi State for them. And then you got to make open field tackles on the outside. Screen game, 20% of the passes roughly from USC's offense are screens. Got to get out there and tackle these guys, right? You got Deuce Robinson on the outside. You got Zachariah Branch, who, look, they haven't had as great a year at receiver as we thought they would, the Trojans, but still dangerous athletes out there. And we saw against Penn State in the first half, like I mentioned, they made them make open field tackles. For the first half, they didn't really do it. Second half, they adjusted and it got better. But I like Notre Dame in this game. I like their defense. I like this matchup with Jaden Maiava at quarterback for USC. I'll take Notre Dame 28-19. Still think there's a road factor. I still think Lincoln Riley could put something together, especially to give him some trouble early. But I think eventually Notre Dame's just a better team.
Yeah, I agree with that. I got Notre Dame winning this one 31-20. I think the run game is going to dominate on USC. And I think Notre Dame's stingy defense has played like one of the best in America so far this year. I believe right now they are top 10 in defensive grade so far this year as well. They'll hold Jaden Maiava and Lincoln Riley's Trojans in check. They put the finishing touches on their playoff resume with an 11-1 record, and Notre Dame will officially host a playoff game. So a playoff game in South Bend, Indiana. We might have to go to that.
Might be an option.
That might be the one we go to.
Options.
Yeah.
We got to figure it out. I can't wait to see these matchups in that first round, but you're right. They're going to get a home game if they win this.
Absolutely. So we both got Notre Dame winning that one and clinching a home game in the college football playoff. All right. Next game we're talking about is my alma mater, but they're not the story here, Dawn. That's because Miami is traveling to Syracuse for a 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time game on ESPN. Playoff implications are interesting because, you win this game if you're Miami and you clinch a spot in the ACC title game against SMU. If you lose this game, you're not going to the ACC title game, and Clemson will be going in your place against SMU. Do you think if Miami loses and they finish the year at 10-2, that they would still get an at-large spot over a 9-3 team like Alabama, or do you think all of a sudden the Hurricanes are in big trouble there?
Where were they ranked? Where are they ranked just now? I was just going to look at it. They're at 9, is it? Right now?
I think they're a little higher than that.
And tonight, because Bama lost in front of them, they're going to be so close. It certainly won't help their case if they were to lose.
They're 8 in the AP poll right now. Which is not the playoff ranking, but it's like this kind of around where it usually
it's somewhere
in
there. They'll be like 7 or 8 in these. Oh, it's so close. I think. Well, my guess is I think they'll be 7.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure because Indiana losing and Alabama losing.
And this is the AP ranking this week.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, they'll be 7 or 8. They would another team. If they lose this game, it'd be extremely borderline. I think they would have a better case if they were to win this one, and then if they lost to SMU in the conference title game,
11-2 they'd be in. I
think 11-2 would get them in, but this is a game you don't want to mess around and lose because again, there's going to be non-SEC teams that are 10-2 sitting right on the fence, and there's going to be 9-3 teams in the SEC that are on the fence, and we're going to be sitting here debating all of them for very few hours, actually, when you think about the final Saturday next week versus then turning around at noon the next Sunday and watching the selection process. But no, I think this has to be considered a must-win.
Because what's their best win? Like Florida then is probably their best win of the season.
The Florida game,
Louisville
too, but then they turned around and lost to Stanford. That's familiar, isn't it? And then again, you look at their 2 losses. If that were the case, Georgia Tech and Syracuse. Syracuse would be what, 8-4 or
8-4? Yeah,
8-4, and Georgia Tech.
No, I'm sorry, that'd be 9-3 if they win this game.
9-3, Syracuse.
I know
That'd be a good year for Syracuse.
It would be a great year for Syracuse.
But you'd be
playoff team Syracuse. I don't know.
You'd be putting yourself on the fence here if you're a 10-2 Miami team. I think 11-2 they might be a little safer because SMU is really good. But this is a dangerous one when you talk about it. I don't know. That's a tough one.
I think if both SMU and Miami win, I think they're both in the playoff.
I could reason with that. I don't hate that.
Yeah, I don't think a committee would punish them for losing a conference title game. I think so.
And they shouldn't. They're 2 really good football teams.
It's a really, if you want to guarantee your spot in the playoff, win this game, and then no matter what happens in the ACC title game, obviously you want the first round bye, but no matter what happens, you should be in the playoff regardless. But if you lose this game and you're 10-2 and you're fighting with some other SEC teams that are 9-3, I don't know how that would go. I really don't know how that would go. So
we'd all be screaming at each other on that Sunday.
It would be a nightmare on X. It would be. But Dawn, you have the Miami offense in this game with Cam Ward, who is not a Maxwell Award finalist, by the way, which I have a Maxwell vote. I voted for Cam Ward. I would say that right now. He was in my top 3. Not a Maxwell Award finalist. He is a Davey O'Brien Award finalist, though. So as one of the best quarterbacks in America, and I would argue he maybe should win the Davey O'Brien Award this year. So what should we be looking out for when he and the Miami offense go against the Syracuse defense?
Can I be honest with you for a second?
Yeah.
I hate this matchup for Syracuse.
I don't like it either.
I'm not a big fan. I've got 3 reasons. Okay. 1, they don't blitz very much. 12th lowest blitz rate in the country. And if you give Cam Ward time, we know what happens. Cam Ward on plays that last longer than 2.5 seconds, 91.3 overall grade, 3rd best in the country. Syracuse coverage, which overall the coverage has not been great on the back end for Syracuse.
102nd in the country in coverage grade. Right?
Yeah, when plays go longer than 2.5 seconds, they're 116th. That's 1. 2, very much struggle to defend in the slot. And you know what's on the other side in the slot there, and that's Xavier Restrepo. And
the boogeyman. Yeah.
Literally, Miami's all-time leading receiver, by the way, much respect. Leads the Power 4 with 894 slot receiving yards and a slot receiving grade of 85.1. That's in the top 10. Okay. Syracuse, 94th in the country in slot coverage grade. 22 explosive catches from slot receivers against Syracuse this year. With as much zone defense as they run, especially cover 3. Syracuse, one of the heaviest cover 3 teams in the country. This chart right here, this is against single high defenses, Xavier Restrepo, okay? And he's not near the top of the nation in targets. He's just so darned efficient. 3rd in the Power 4 in receiving yards against single high coverages. 1st in explosive receptions. 87.1 receiving grade is 3rd. If you play single high against Miami, he is going to find the space in it. And I'm very much worried about this matchup, especially since he's in the slot on 90% of his routes. He is arguably the best slot receiver in the country. I think even for this upcoming draft, I think he's a top 50 player. I would take him in the 2nd round tomorrow. He's as good a football IQ as any receiver in the country, a terrific route runner, great hands, super tough. I think everything about Xavier Restrepo is a horrible matchup for Syracuse. I'm just being honest with you. I'm watching their secondary and saying, I'm like, okay, I watched probably 5 or 6 games of their secondary last night because this is what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching them, and some of the plays, the explosives especially, they gave up, and I go, Xavier Restrepo's coming down the pipe. Yeah. I don't like this at all. I got to be honest with you. I really had this thought. And look, we know if Syracuse is going to win, it's going to be a high-scoring game anyway. I got the same feeling I did when we previewed Miami-Louisville. I was like, there's going to be some points in this game.
Yeah.
And there's points in every Miami game, but I'm especially worried about this to the point where, look, Restrepo, his season high in yards is 163 this year. I actually wouldn't be shocked if he broke that. If he had a new season high this year, I'm telling you right now, this is an awful matchup with Restrepo against as much single high coverage and as much as Syracuse has struggled to defend in the slot this season. I'm extremely worried for the secondary.
It's just so disappointing as a Syracuse alum and Syracuse fan, obviously, when, going into the year, I would say the secondary is one of the biggest strengths of the entire team.
Good players back
Justin
there.
Barron, Deuce Chestnut they have back there, and Fran Brown was a defensive backs coach at Georgia, and he comes into Syracuse, and now all of a sudden that we thought was the biggest strength of the team, it's been one of the biggest weaknesses of the team right now, the secondary. So it's been kind of disappointing. Obviously, a lot of other things have gone really well for Syracuse this year. It's why they're 8-3, which for Syracuse is a great record, honestly. But at the same time, the secondary has been one of the most disappointing parts, I think, of the team this year. One of the most impressive parts of the team, though, Dalton, has been Kyle McCord and this group of pass catchers, though. And my matchup to watch is, all right, can Syracuse's offensive line hold up enough to give McCord and his playmakers a chance out there? Because right now, the Orange are 18th in EPA per pass, tied for 9th in America in receiving grade, and Kyle McCord actually leads the nation in passing yards with 3,924, and he leads the Power 4 with 27 big-time throws. So we're all talking about how Cam Ward, Davey O'Brien award winner, I would agree with that, but Kyle McCord actually leads the nation in passing yards.
He's the ripcord.
He is the ripcord. Yeah, absolutely this year. The one area, though, where Syracuse's passing game has had some issues is along the offensive line. Right now, they're 50th in pass blocking grade this year at 73.6. So not terrible, but it's about average in college football. So they're 25th in pressure rate allowed at 25%. And you're wondering, okay, how are they top 25 in pressure rate allowed, but 50th in pass blocking grade? Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Kyle McCord gets rid of the football very fast. He has the 9th fastest average time to throw in the nation at 2.4 seconds, 2.41 to be exact. He'll likely need to continue to do that against Miami. Right now, their defensive line is 4th in grade as a unit, 87.8. Only Ole Miss and Michigan have a higher grade in the Power 4 among defensive lines. Miami has gotten a pressure on over 40% of opposing dropbacks, the 5th highest rate in the country as well. If Syracuse's offensive line holds up against this elite Miami defensive line, there is an opportunity for Kyle McCord and all these pass catchers to make some big plays down the field. Because we've seen before, Dalton, even that Louisville game, Miami's secondary is vulnerable out there. Right now, since week 4, Miami is 87th in coverage grade. But if the defensive line dominates, then all of a sudden, in like the Pitt game where it's like, okay, well, McCord's under pressure every single time, throwing interception after interception, then you can see an ugly performance from Syracuse's offense. But if they give McCord time back there, then I think there's an avenue for Syracuse to maybe keep up a little bit with Miami in a potential shootout.
Miami's back 7 in coverage is by far the biggest weakness on their team. And look, McCord's going to let it rip one way or the other. He might come out in this game and throw 5 interceptions, and that'll be it, but he's going to let it fly, right? We've seen it all season, and I think, the big thing, I think you mentioned it right, you have to protect him. We saw this at Ohio State last year. When he's protected, he's really darn good, and boy, I just keep thinking about that starting 4. That starting 4 for Miami that we got to see in that Louisville game. Bain, Barron, Barrow, and Mesidor. That is an NFL defensive line. And I'll tell you what, you mentioned that 40% pressure rate. Anytime I see a pressure rate sitting around 40% or higher, that's a big number for me. I start to really worry about quarterbacks when you see it in just one game or if you see it consistently. 40% is the mark where you go, oh, I'm worried about my pass protection. I am. That's the number. Under that, we start getting a little better in the low 30s, about average. And if you get into the lower 20s, you've got really good protection. But 40 is dangerous. And this is an extremely dangerous defensive line. You mentioned it. If they give McCord time, he'll have a chance to make throws down the field because Miami's coverage has been kind of out of sorts in a lot of games this season. But they need to give him time or it could get ugly. And
maybe the quick passing game would be important as well because he get rid of the football very quickly at 2.4 seconds. But he does make some downfield throws when you're going against a guy like Cam Ward as well. So Dalton, ultimately, will my Syracuse Orange pull off the massive upset and potentially ruin Miami's season, or will the Hurricanes survive and move on to the ACC title game?
There are a lot of factors in this game that looks like it could be a shootout, right? Are these the two leading? You mentioned McCord leading the nation. Is Ward second behind him?
He's close. I don't know if he's...
If you have the nation's 2 leading passers in the same game, you should get a high-flying game here. And I think that's what we'll get. I think you're still going to see some difficulties from this Miami secondary that has kind of struggled. But I'm going to take Miami in a high-scoring game, 45-31. I think it could very well play out the same as we saw in that Louisville game, which ended, 52-45? That game did. I just think there are flaws on this Miami's defense, but I think their pass rush makes enough plays to disturb McCord. If McCord stays out of the turnovers, then you could really have a ball game here and a high-flying one at that. But I'll take Miami by 14.
I got Miami 41-28. By the way, it is Kyle McCord number 1 and then Cam Ward number 2 in terms of passing yards so far this year. The 2 leading passers in college football going head-to-head in this game. I think McCord will do his best to keep the Orange in this one, but I don't think he can outduel who will likely be a Heisman finalist in Cam Ward, or should be a Heisman finalist. He wasn't a Maxwell Award finalist, but should be a Heisman finalist in Cam Ward. I think Cam Ward wins that battle. I think the Hurricanes punch their ticket to the ACC title game and most likely clinch a playoff spot as well with this win. So, yeah, I think this is a big game for Miami, and I think they will end up victorious over the Orange with a 13-point victory. All right, Dalton, before we move on to the second half of our massive preview show today, we got to talk about our sponsor. That is Fabric by Gerber Life. So picture a future where your child has the financial freedom to pursue their dreams without any barriers. With a UGMA account from Fabric by Gerber Life, it's a real possibility because of the simple but impactful actions that you can take today. UGMA stands for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. While your kids can't invest when they're minors, a UGMA account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to grow. It's all online, and setting up an account could take you just 5 minutes with as little as $1 a day. Then you can manage your child's UGMA account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFF NFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFF NFL. meetfabric.com/PFF NFL. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contribution required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, next game we're talking about, Dalton, is the Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama. 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. The playoff implications, Alabama's not dead yet. I think a lot of people are kind of counting them out right now. I don't think it's over for the Crimson Tide. Now, of course, they're right now outside of the current 12-team field.
We think.
If they win this game and get a little bit of help, like we've talked about already for plenty of these games already, we were saying, okay, if this team loses is Alabama, like what's the conversation between them and Alabama? Alabama's not dead yet, right? They need some help a little bit, but they're not dead yet. They got to beat Auburn as well, who just took down A&M in a awesome game, a quadruple overtime game. If they beat Auburn, though, then all of a sudden they turn their attention and hope maybe one or two slip-ups in the top 12 in order for them to get into the college football playoff. So I know a lot of people are counting them out already. I don't think it's over yet. I think it's kind of very dangerous to count out a team with how crazy the season has been. Do you think the Crimson Tide are out now, or do you think they're still alive?
No, they're not out of it. And it's because of all of the other chaos, like with Ole Miss losing and everything else that happened inside the top 20. They are by no means out of it. Now, I can't guarantee that they're in it. They may be the most hotly debated team come selection time when we get to that point, and if they are to beat Auburn. I mean, that's, first of all, you got to take care of this week's task first, because we saw them maybe look ahead of it last week against Oklahoma. And look, for as much as we want to be right about every single game here, we're not going to be. Something wacky is going to happen in this mix of these 11 games. And you know what, Alabama, I don't know if we'll see if they learned their lesson from last week, but that was a flat performance. And again, it shows you got to respect your opponents this time of year. Anybody can beat you.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's a rivalry game as well, and there's been a lot of smack talk already, as Sycamore Brewing has already pointed out, or Sycamore Savage, and our Chad has pointed out already. I think one of the linebackers for Auburn said that Ryan Williams is like whatever, like he's not even that great of a player. It's like, it's a lot to say about a guy who's been really good this year, and I just say, it's kind of smart by him to say that when he's like, I don't have to cover him. My corners are going to cover him. So if he does kill us, I could at least say, I didn't cover him.
They're not putting me on him. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's good. And the Iron Bowl always gets weird. No matter how good or how bad these teams are, it always gets weird. You remember last year when Jalen Morrell with the fourth and goal from like a 30-yard line,
4th and 31. Yep.
And he got the miracle touchdown on Isaiah Bond. It always gets weird in the Iron Bowl. Kick 6 obviously as well. So it should be hopefully another amazing game in this one. You have the Auburn offense in this game, though, Dalton. What should we be looking out for when the Tigers in the ball?
Okay, so certainly I like the fact that last week Peyton Thorne had a good day throwing to Cam Coleman, throwing to Keandre Lambert-Smith and all that, right? But here's the reality with the Auburn Tigers. They want to run the football, and Jarquez Hunter is on an absolute heater. Okay, his last 4 games, 560 rushing yards, 86.7 rushing grade, 7.3 yards per attempt, and second in the Power 4 behind R.J. Harvey with 21 explosive runs. Jarquez Hunter running through people and making big plays is where this offense starts, right? And let's be real about something here. Alabama got run all over by Oklahoma last week by a true freshman tailback and Jackson Arnold, right? So it's not like they're invulnerable in the run game. And now Deontay Lawson, the star linebacker who had the third highest run defense grade on their team, is out for the season. So now we're replacing maybe one of our best run defenders in our front seven. We're playing a team who wants to run the football. We gave up 255 rushing yards, a season high last week, and in the last two meetings against Auburn, Alabama's given up 611 rushing yards. If you think Auburn doesn't want to come out and run it down Alabama's throat in this game, you're kidding yourself, because there's too many things that say they should still do it. And again, did they win the game in part? Very much in part because of Peyton Thorne and the receiver? Sure, but that's not the wheelhouse. Auburn wants to run. They want to stop the run. They want to be the more physical team. I think if they're going to win this game, they got to continue on this hot streak that Jarquez Hunter is on. And they have every reason to believe right now, especially after watching last week's tape and what Oklahoma did, they have every reason to believe they could still run the ball on the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and really, Dawn, Alabama hopes they can run the ball on the Auburn Tigers here, because really the match to watch on the other side of the ball is, can Auburn force Jalen Moreau to win as a pure drop-back passer? Alabama had its worst offensive performance in over 20 years against Oklahoma this past weekend. They scored just 3 points on the Sooners, which is tied for their fewest in a game since 2000. So it's been a very long time, almost 25 years, since Alabama scored that few points, scored fewer points in a game. I believe scored 3 points in a 2004 or 2003 game or something like that.
Was that the game you mentioned against Nick Saban?
Against Lou Holtz. The Nick Saban one was the biggest blowout in the regular season when they lost by, and they lost by 21, obviously, to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, how they beat Alabama and how they just shut down that Alabama offense, they took away the ground game. They only allowed 75 total rushing yards from Alabama in that game and 2.6 yards per carry. Each of those figures are the lowest for Alabama all year, and the 2.6 yards per carry is the worst for Alabama over the last 2 years for the Crimson Tide as well. Jalen Moreau had only 12 rushing yards on 14 carries, forcing him to win in drop-back situations. And not only could they not do that, they had their worst EPA per pass performance of the PFF college era. So that's a big, big problem. And Dawn, if you take away his legs, that's the recipe for success for defenses. Look at this. Jalen Moreau's fewest rushing yards in a game this year. Oklahoma, 12 yards. Vanderbilt, 20 yards. Tennessee, 34 yards. You know what all three games have in common right there?
They lost.
Those are the only 3 losses for Alabama this year. So the key is take away Milroe's legs, and you have a great chance at winning this game. And I will say, Auburn's run D has been the team's biggest strength this year. Right now, they're 5th in yards per carry allowed in the country with 3.9. They're 10th in run defense grade with a 92 defensive grade on run plays. They've had some issues, though, with mobile quarterbacks. They've allowed 3 opposing quarterbacks to run for 75 or more yards on them, and Taylor Green, Marcel Reed, and Michael Hawkins Jr. If they can shore that up against Jalen Moreau, Auburn can absolutely pull off the upset in this game and go bowling as well. I know we talk a lot about how important this game is for Alabama's playoff hopes. Auburn needs to win this game to go bowling as well, which is very important for them as well. So take away Milroe's legs. You can see right there, his worst rushing performances of the season coincided with Alabama's 3 losses of the season. That's no coincidence. You take away his legs, it's a major part of this offense.
And I think philosophically, Brent Venables went about it the right way last week because, the 3 guys in the backfield, Milroe, Jam Miller, Justice Haynes, all right, all as runners. Who are you most afraid of?
Jam Moreau.
Right.
Yeah.
Take away the one you're afraid of, and Oklahoma wasn't afraid of the other 2 because they're good backs, but they're not, 2 of the elite backs in the country. They're not Ashton Ginty and some of these other guys that we talk about. If you make Milroe distribute the football, whether it be in the run game or in the passing game, obviously, and especially as long as you prevent those home run balls, the deep shots that we've talked about, what is it? Screw it. Ryan Williams is down there somewhere. As long as you prevent those balls, which they completed one last week, and then the penalty took it away and all of that. But I'm with you. I think if you take away Milroe's feet and you make him play a traditional brand of quarterback, there are some issues that still pop up there.
So, Dawn, ultimately, in a game that Alabama needs to win to keep their slim but still alive, playoff hopes alive, will they win this game, or will Auburn win this game and go bowling?
Can I rewind to last year's game for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. Auburn completed only 5 passes in that whole game last year.
That's insane. I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. Peyton Thorne only completed 5 passes in that game. All right. Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell had 16 pressures together in that game. They were the 2 best players on the field. They just took the game over. Okay. You had the Hail Mary, right? Jalen Milroe, Isaiah Bond, right? Jermaine Burton was their leading receiver in that game. Alabama, Nick Saban was the head coach, right? But here's the thing about all those guys I just mentioned. We still have Milroe, okay? Saban's gone. Bond is gone. Burton's gone. Turner's gone. Braswell's gone. And Milroe remains with not the same Alabama team. And Auburn only lost essentially because of a 4th and 31 Hail Mary, right? The last time Auburn won in Tuscaloosa, Cam Newton was their quarterback.
Legendary game. That was his Heisman game,
24-point comeback, right?
Yeah.
And that game ended 28-27, right? I don't like where Alabama's going right now. Give me Auburn 28-27, same score as Cam Newton beat him with.
Wow. So you're saying Peyton Thorne Heisman game here?
Well, he's making a case. He's making a late push, we'll call it. I will take the Tigers. I like their ability to run the ball. I actually really like their run defense. I thought outside of the Reed scrambles, they did a nice job in the design game last week. They've done the last 2 years. They've run the ball well in Alabama, and I don't think this Alabama defense is nearly as good as the last two that we've seen in these last 2 games. Especially the Lawson injury hurts. Bad. Yeah. Really bad. He's a monster in the run game. 2 elite linebackers, but Lawson's the one better in the run game between him and Jahad Campbell. I'm going to take Auburn in the upset. They will win for the first time in Tuscaloosa since 2010.
Listen, our social media director, Zach Tantillo, who is an Auburn alum, obviously a massive Auburn fan as well, he's been coming at you, Dalton, for saying that you've been too harsh on his Auburn Tigers this year. I think you made up for it right here by picking Auburn to win the Iron Bowl. I think you're all good between you and Zach right now.
Well, all they have to do now is not let me down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll see. I am going with Alabama in this game, and I'm going with Alabama pretty convincingly. I have Alabama winning this one 34-20. I think Milroe will bounce back against Auburn. I don't think the run D is excellent. We talked about that already. It's not as good as Oklahoma's, though. And I don't think that they'll be completely shut down like they were against Oklahoma. And I think there's an avenue as well for Milroe to win a little bit down the field with Ryan. Also, you're talking back to Ryan Williams now. Like, there is a little added chip on the shoulder for that superstar receiver they have in Ryan Williams. So they'll do that. And I think the Alabama defense will do enough against Auburn's offense to hold them to only 20 points in this one. So I think Alabama's going to win the Iron Bowl 34-20. You obviously disagree with me. And obviously if they lose that game, Dalton, they're out. They're out of the college football playoff race.
Certainly.
Yeah, they're definitely out. They're already out of the playoff picture right now. And if they lose this game, they're obviously even further out. But I do think Alabama stays alive in the playoff race with a win over Auburn. All right, let's get to another Big 12 game. Arizona State at Arizona, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. Playoff implications. Arizona State most likely just needs to win this game to make the Big 12 title game. We'll talk about a scenario where it actually wouldn't happen if they win this game in just a second. But Arizona State, Dalton, really amazing season so far. 3-9 over the last 2 years. Now they're 9-2. It's really amazing what Kenny Dillingham's done in his second year at Arizona State. They have ranked wins in Kansas State and BYU. They don't really completely control their own destiny, but it's close enough. So if you look at the scenario where they don't make the Big 12 title game, even with a win, this is basically all they need to do. They need to win and BYU to win and TCU to win Baylor to lose, Iowa State to lose, Texas Tech to lose, or Colorado to lose. So the only way that Arizona State does not make the Big 12 title game with a win is if all of those other things happen in the opposite direction, which I looked it up, Dawn. We have our betting tools available at pff.com. It tells you exactly the percentage chance of every team winning. And, using my calculus class where I took in college, which I failed really badly. But I did understand how to make odds for multiple things to occur. And you multiply all the odds for those to occur, there's a 1% chance that exact combination occurs. So there's a 1% chance that even if Arizona State wins, they don't make the Big 12 title game. So it's most likely win and in for Arizona State. But there is a scenario out there where they don't make it in, is if Colorado beats Oklahoma State, Iowa State beats Kansas State, Houston beats BYU, Texas beats West Virginia, Baylor beats Kansas, and Cincinnati beats TCU. That is a scenario where Arizona State would not make it in to the Big 12 title game. That exact scenario, all of that needs to happen. So basically, it is winning in for Arizona State.
All you can do is control what you can control in the Big 12. And isn't that amazing? We have some wild scenario where no team in a conference controls their own
in the
destiny.
last week of the season.
That's incredible.
And nobody's clinched, which a lot of conferences, a lot of teams have clinched, or 2 teams have clinched. Nobody's clinched in the Big 12. And nobody controls their own destiny in the Big 12.
And
either.
in theory, not just the 4 at the top. I believe it's 8 teams that are still technically somehow have a pulse. Is it 9? Whatever it is. So
wild conference.
The Big 12 is even wilder than we thought it would be in the preseason. It's incredible. But no, I'll tell you, with Arizona State, someone asked me actually earlier today. They said, who in this conference is playing the best football right now? And I told them, I said Arizona State.
Yeah,
they're just playing a terrific brand of football right now.
Yeah, and listen. Basically winning in, but I just don't want Arizona State fans to be shocked if they win this game and don't make the Big 12 title. Like, wait, everyone told us winning in. What happened? That's the one scenario.
We're 99% sure.
Literally 99% sure that it wouldn't happen. So that's the one scenario where Arizona State would not make the Big 12 title game even with a win. But you have the Arizona offense in this one, Dalton. What should we be looking out for in the Wildcats of the ball?
Revenge.
Yeah,
and this is where this happens. I believe Arizona put up 59 points. I want to say it was on Arizona State last year. It was the last game of the season, just like this. They had a tough season. They only won 3 games up to that point. Arizona was having a really good season. They were one of the premier breakout teams in college football last year, right? Noah Fifita coming on. Let's just roll back to the box score last year. Do you know what Noah Fifita did to them last year?
Oh, he went off, didn't he?
How about 527 yards
going off.
and 5 touchdowns? And Teteroa McMillan had 266 of those yards.
Yeah.
Okay. They took advantage of a rival and absolutely teed off through the air. Arizona State, I can guarantee you, they don't want to have that again. And I'll tell you this: I talked about their run defense earlier in the year. We know their defense plays very hard, but gotten a lot better in coverage this year too. Okay, last year they were 117th in coverage grade. This year they're 44th. They're solidly above average, right? And they're actually, to me, I watch them. They're getting better as the season goes on. I think we've seen it. We've talked about it offensively with Sam Levitt and the gang on that side getting better. I think the defense has gotten a lot better too. So you talk about a team who I want to look at their safeties real quick specifically. Last year, their safeties, not the same guys that are playing right now, had the second worst coverage grade in the entire country. They just couldn't stop passes down the field. Fifita in that game last year completed 11 of his 18 passes beyond 10 yards downfield, just teeing off on them. All right? Now you got a couple guys at safety who've been playing really well. Xavion Alford, who hadn't played in a game this year before in the last 2 years. He hadn't played since 2021 at USC. Missed 22 with an injury and missed 2023 with some sort of eligibility issue. 88.2 coverage grade this season. One of the best in the country. Miles Rouser, who comes in from New Mexico State. He's also been solid, okay? Now you went from the second worst coverage grade at safety to inside the top 20 with these two guys. And it's allowing them to prevent big plays from occurring down the field. A big issue last year was just they gave up big plays and deep shots left and right, especially in this game. These two guys are a huge key at safety, Alford and Rouser, where you're talking about, okay, how's Arizona going to win a ball game? Because all they've had all year, realistically, consistently, is Teteroa McMillan in the passing game, right? Well, that's what you have to slow down. And these two, Fifita and McMillan, are probably going to feel confident coming in against this Arizona State team and feeling like they could put up points. If Arizona State's coverage improvements hold, I like their chances in this game. But you got a big task covering maybe the best receiver in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Teteroa McMillan, a finalist for the Blitnikoff Award, given to the best receiver in college football, could very well win that award as well, the way he's been playing this year. Matchups watching the other side of the ball, Dawn, is Cam Scadaboo and whether or not Arizona could slow him down, because he has been a workhorse for Arizona State's offense this year. Among FBS running backs, he is second in first down/touchdown carries. He is second in receiving yards. He's fourth in broken tackles on runs, and he's seventh in yards after contact. He's simply one of the best all-around running backs that we have in college football, and he refuses to go down easily. That could be a problem against Arizona, because right now they have a 70.4 run defense grade. That is 110th in the nation. They've allowed 1,167 yards after contact this year. That's 80th in the country as well. Arizona, I will say, has not allowed a running back to have 50 or more receiving yards on them this year. And obviously, I mentioned before, Cam Scadaboo is one of the best receiving backs in America. But it's also fair to say they have not played a running back who's as dangerous in that aspect as Cam Scadaboo. So slowing down number 4 is priority number 1 for Arizona in this game, because Cam Scadaboo really has the capability of taking games over.
He's the engine He certainly is the engine, and then Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson are the gas and making big plays off of play action. And if you line up man-to-man against this team, I think you're asking for a world of hurt with Scadaboo and a lot of the ways they scheme him open, and with Tyson. Look, very much, it's kind of weird, very much like McMillan the second half of last year, becoming one of the best receivers in the country. It's exactly what Jordan Tyson has done, and I don't know if he'll have all that revenge against them and go for 266 like Tet did last year, but I really like a lot of what's going on with Arizona State's offense, and I think it could cause Wildcats a lot of problems.
It could. Yeah, it absolutely could. So, Dalton, in a game where Arizona State pretty much controls their own destiny, will they punch their ticket to the Big 12 title game, or will Arizona pull off a major upset?
I think they'll do it. I think the Sun Devils are going to do it. I have them 34-24, and I think the big things that scare me, obviously, are McMillan, who can take a game over at any time, and just this is another one where it's on the road, it's the rivalry thing, and it's not Arizona State has been playing extremely good football, but they're not a perfect team, right? You mentioned last week, pass rush isn't great. It wasn't great last week against BYU. That's kind of one thing where I go, okay, if you're going to give Fafita extra time to mess around back there, then you have something. But I think Arizona State is the better team. I think the way their offense is rolling in two dimensions right now, not just with Scadaboo, but with Levitt and Tyson also. And Levitt's mobile himself. He can run a little bit. I think Arizona State has a lot more avenues of winning this game, and I think they'll find a way to get there. I'll take them by 10 points.
Yeah, I got Arizona State winning by a little bit bigger margin. I have it 34-21. I think Cam Scadaboo is going to have a lot of success against Arizona's run defense this year that's had some issues, filling gaps, and also just having issues tackling as well. And against a guy who's as physical as Cam Scadaboo, that's a big problem. So I think that'll be a problem. I think Arizona State will win this game, win their 5th straight game, and pretty much lock up a spot in the Big 12 title game next week.
We're pretty sure. Again,
there's a 1% chance where that exact crazy combination occurs where they don't get in with a win, but we're literally 99% sure Arizona State would be in if they win this game. So Arizona State, we both have taken down Arizona in that one. Next game we're talking about is arguably the biggest game of the entire weekend. Texas at Texas A&M, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. Playoff implications: the winner of this game goes to the SEC title game and could lock up a spot or lock up a first-round bye in the college football playoff. Texas A&M is out with a loss. Texas, I would say, is pretty safely in, even with a loss to Texas A&M right now. They are 10-1 on the season. It's hard to imagine, even though Texas hasn't played the toughest schedule this year, it's hard to imagine a 10-2 Texas with all the other chaos going on right now. They're going to be in, even if they lose to Texas A&M, I would imagine, on Saturday. But if Texas loses this game, they won't play in the SEC title game, and they won't be able to get a first-round bye in the college football playoff. And I mentioned before how the schedule for Texas has not been that difficult this year, Dalton. That could also mean Texas might not host a playoff game either, right? So that is a big thing to watch out for Texas in this game, because right now you can look at it and say their best win is over Florida, who's 6-5 on the season. They beat Vanderbilt, who's also 6-5 on the season.
Yeah.
Michigan, who's 6-5 on the season as well. It's just like not a lot there for Texas in terms of resume wise this year. For A&M, there's no room for error now. You need to beat Texas. They just lost to Auburn in quadruple overtime. They're 8-3 on the season. They're well behind all the other 3-loss teams in the SEC as well. Not only do I think Texas A&M needs to beat Texas to make the SEC title game, Dawn, I think they got to beat Georgia as well. We mentioned before how in previous weeks we're whoever makes the SEC title game is going to get in. Now I don't know. If A&M beats Texas, I still think they got to beat Georgia, because I don't know if a 9-4 SEC team will get into the college football playoff.
I don't think so, especially with a loss to Auburn. Hurts. That hurts big time, and I know Auburn's been playing better lately, but that's still a team that's 5-6 now.
I think non-SEC people would riot if a 4-loss team got into the college football playoff.
Yeah, most likely.
So I do think, and I know we said before how whoever makes it to the title game is going to get in. I don't think that's the case for Texas A&M. I think they got to beat Texas and they got to beat Georgia in order to get into the college football playoff.
That's a task, isn't it?
So that's a tall
back-to-back weeks. Yeah.
Take it 1 week by a time though, and they got to win this game over Texas, obviously. And Dawn, you do have the A&M offense in this one. What should you be looking out for Marcel Reed and the Aggies at the ball?
I got to be honest, I'm a little worried that Texas A&M is running out of juice in their running game. That Le'Veon Moss season-ending injury that he suffered, what was it, on his first or second carry against South Carolina?
Brutal.
I'm worried about that because these two losses that they've had recently to South Carolina and Auburn have been two of their 5 lowest rushing totals of the season. And look, Marcel Reed has played well in the second half last week, throwing the football right through, I believe, 3 touchdowns against Auburn. Got him back in the game from a 21-0 deficit, but Auburn's a different beast, especially in the secondary, than you're talking about Texas, who has the highest coverage grade in the country and a top 5 pass rush grade and the highest graded defense in the country. And the run defense is down in the 30s, which is still very good. But look, A&M wants to run the ball. They should run the ball against Texas, but I'm worried. Look, these last 2 losses, okay, I'm going to say they played New Mexico State in between. Cool. Against South Carolina and Auburn together. Got 3.5 yards per design carry here. That's not how A&M wants to win ball games. And I know Marcel Reed can scramble and we can get yards that way, but they need to be able to line up and run the football. And I'm really worried about the fact that Le'Veon Moss is now out. And they're just not Amari Daniels and even Marcel Reed in the run game. If teams are disciplined on the read option, obviously, unlike LSU, that they're just not making anything extra happen. So I mentioned 3.5 yards per carry. Only 4 missed tackles forced on design runs in those 2 games. Only 2 explosive runs. 1.8 yards after contact per carry is, I think, barely inside or just outside the top 100. It's just not going to fly. They are running out of juice in this running game. They need Amari Daniels to find something in his heart and soul to have a huge game in this on the ground, because if you get in obvious passing situations against Texas, don't we have Jahdae Barron, Thorpe Award finalist?
Yes.
Is that right? Out at corner, you got Andrew Makuba. You still have a pass rush with Alfred Collins and those guys. And Colin Simmons up front, who's a true freshman freak of absolute nature. This Texas defense is actually the best part of this team, and it has been all year. You don't want to get in passing situations. If A&M struggles in the designed run game like they have in their last 2 SEC games, and Texas defense, I'd say, is pretty comparable to South Carolina's, they're going to have a huge problem. Last week they got away with it, and early they almost didn't. That game looked like it was going to be a blowout, and Auburn's secondary and some kicking woes and different things got in their way. Texas isn't going to make those mistakes on defense or special teams or anything like that. A&M's got to find a way to run the ball.
Yeah, they absolutely do. So they got to find a way to run the ball, and Texas, if they don't block well, they have a lot of problems as well. So the Texas offensive line against the A&M defensive line is the most must-see matchup and the most must-see game of this weekend, Dalton. So Quinn Ewers has been up and down this year, right? I don't think he's been nearly as good as he was last year. There's some really high highs, like the Michigan game he's outstanding in. Some low lows. The Georgia game, he was objectively horrible in that game against Georgia. But he has had one of the best offensive lines in college football blocking for him. Right now, the Longhorns have a 94.2 pass blocking grade. That's the best in college football by over 4 points. 70 run blocking grade as well is 11th in the Power 4. They have an 86 offensive line grade right now, which is second to only Iowa among Power 4 offensive lines. So one of the best, if not the best offensive lines you can argue in college football so far. Certainly the best in terms of pass protection right now in college football. And Quinn Ewers has only a 43.9 passing grade under pressure, making the play of his offensive line absolutely critical to their offensive success as well. They should have their hands full against the Texas A&M Aggies right now, though, Dawn. They have 195 pressures this year, top 20 mark in the country. They're 13th in the country with a 91.5 team run defense grade. And, Dawn, I cannot wait to watch the tackles for Texas against the edge rushers for Texas A&M. Look at this, the PFF big board right now, according to Trevor Sycamore. Number 11 is Texas left tackle Calvin Banks Jr. Number 22 is Texas right tackle Cameron Williams. Number 10 overall, Texas A&M edge defender Nick Scorton. And number 26 overall, his running mate, the other edge defender, Shamar Stewart. The 2 tackles and the 2 edge defenders are all first-round prospects on our 2025 NFL draft big board right now. So that is going to be amazing tape to watch for not only this game and could ultimately decide this game, but also amazing tape to watch when we get to the NFL draft as well. 4 of those guys that have legitimate aspirations to be first-round picks in the NFL draft.
Yeah, that's a lot of talent.
Yeah,
for darn sure. In Texas, I really like the way the last couple weeks they've gotten Trey Wisner involved in the run game, but that A&M run defense especially is a problem. And if Quinn Ewers, look like you mentioned it, when they've been getting in obvious passing situations, it has been up and down, right? And he hasn't looked consistently great this year. And I think even their guys on the outside haven't looked consistently great. Let's be real. Their best receivers this year has been Gunnar Helm at tight end. He's been their most consistent guy. I think he had 2 touchdowns last week. Is that right? If I remember that right.
I think so, yeah.
He's been consistent, but I think it is dangerous too for Texas in this game. This is not a defense you want to mess around with, and I think Mike Elko is going to come in with a good game plan.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, ultimately in a game that will determine who plays Georgia in the SEC title game, and ultimately will decide whether or not Texas A&M keeps their season alive, who will win in this reignition of a big rivalry?
I do think both defenses are going to have some success in this game, but I like Texas just a little bit better. It's on the road. Again, you got teams playing tough road rivalry games this week. This is another one. I do think Kyle Field plays a little bit of a factor. We'll see what Quinn Ewers' composure looks like, and this game could come down to which quarterback makes more mistakes, but I'm going to ride with Texas defense as the best unit on the field. The Longhorns, and just at all 3 levels, got great players, okay? 27-21 Longhorns. I think they escape with a win. I think they out-defense the Aggies. I think it's going to be a fun game, and the danger in it for either quarterback is going to be turnovers, but I think Texas finds a way to ride their defense, and Ewers just makes not too many mistakes in the process of this, because I do think going against this defense and Mike Elko is really dangerous. But I've got Texas 27 and A&M 21.
It is worth mentioning that Quinn Ewers is a little hobbled. He suffered a mild ankle sprain in that game against Kentucky last week, so I think he will play. I think everything I've seen is like he will be playing in this game, but it is worth mentioning that, especially if it's a run for his life against that.
Right. Will he be able to move?
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
And he's had issues with his pocket presence all year, too.
And we saw Georgia send a good amount of blitz looks at this offensive line, especially off the right side. I would not be shocked at all if Elko mixes some things up here and sends some different looks at him.
Yeah, even saying that, I do have Texas winning this game as well, 31-20. I think the Texas A&M passing game is going to struggle to get anything going against what's been a suffocating pass defense for Texas, whether it be their coverage unit, which has been among the best in America, or their pass rushing unit, which has been among the best in America as well. And then I think on the other side of the ball, the Texas offensive line is elite. There's no way. I know the A&M defensive line is ferocious, but the Texas offensive line is just as good, if not slightly better, than the A&M defensive line as well. They'll hold up enough in what should be a heavyweight battle for Ewers to find his talented stable of weapons. Another thing, Dalton, the A&M secondary has been up and down this year. Right? There's some really good games and some not so great games either. So that's an avenue too. If the Texas offensive line does hold up, there's an avenue there for Ewers to find his playmakers down the field as well. So Texas win this game. They kill A&M season is over after this. They'll make a bowl game, obviously, but they will not be making cuts for a playoff. And Texas sets up a rematch with Georgia in the SEC championship game, which would be a hell of a game to watch next weekend, which, of course, we're going to preview. We're going to preview all 9 conference title games as well. But, Dalton, we're done with these 9 games in the regular season, but we still have to do 2 more because there's still 2 more Big 12 games that we got to get to.
Big 12 bonanza.
Well, yeah, we got to talk about all of these situations in the Big 12 right now. We'll get to Kansas State at Iowa State, which really could be the best Big 12 game of all of them, honestly. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. Like Arizona State, Iowa State most likely just needs to win to make the Big 12 title game right now because BYU and Colorado both lost, putting Iowa State in a great position to make their second Big 12 title game in program history and consequently a spot for the college football playoff as well. So the only scenario where Iowa State does not make the Big 12 title game, even if they beat Kansas State, is if Colorado wins, Arizona State wins, BYU loses, and West Virginia loses. So those are the scenarios right there. So really, win and BYU win and Texas Tech loses, win and Arizona State loses, or win and Colorado loses. Those are the scenarios for Iowa State to get into the Big 12 title game. So basically, winning in, it's unlikely that all of those things happen, but essentially the BYU losing to Houston, which we'll talk about in just a second as well. But
if I'm remembering this right, that sets up that scenario you just talked about is a 3-way tie where Arizona State and Colorado get in. Is that right? I think that's what it shapes up to be.
BYU wins
Oh, no, maybe.
Oh, no, BYU loses. You're right. It'd be Arizona
If
State.
BYU
Arizona
loses,
State.
you've
Be
got
Arizona
the other
State
three in a
Colorado.
three-way
Yeah.
tie. It'll be Arizona State, Colorado. Okay.
That's the only scenario. So that Texas Tech West Virginia game is actually pretty big for their. And we'll talk about that for my upset pick later on. But
oh wow! Oh, now you're getting ahead of it. The Big 12 bonanza, even in the upset.
Exactly. Yeah. So that obviously you got to win this game right now. Kansas State in my current top 25 on PFF.com. You can check it out as well. So this is a big game for both. And also, Don, it's worth mentioning as well because I know we're talking about Iowa State. We're talking about Colorado and Arizona State and BYU how they make the title game. If there's absolute madness in the Big 12 and all four of them lose, Kansas State, there is a world where the tiebreakers break their way and they also make the title game.
I have no idea what that world is. I didn't look that deep into it. Because if we get a 7-way tie in the Big 12, I don't even know what
I tried. I don't think we'd have enough room in the full screen to get the exact Kansas State tiebreaker for them to get in.
Yeah,
but there is a world, though, where Kansas State gets in if all four of them, I think, lose. So or at least some combination of them lose as well. So it's complicated, but there is a world for them as well. But Dawn, you have the Iowa State offense in this game. What should we be looking out for when the Cyclones in the ball?
Can I rewind to last year for just a second?
Yeah.
Remember this game between these two teams in the snow? It was 42-35, Iowa State and Kansas State. I didn't realize how just ridiculous the numbers were in this game until I looked at it this week. All right. Kansas State ran 102 plays, which you would think would work to their favor. That's what they want to do, right? And gained, if I take out kneel downs, they gained 497 yards, all right? Iowa State ran 32 plays if you take out kneel downs, which you would think means they got slaughtered, but they won the game. 32 plays and they gained 499 yards, which is the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life. Abu Sama, running back, had over 270 yards rushing, and Kansas State just gave up big plays like crazy. The strangest classic game I've ever seen in my life, okay? But on top of, don't give up 270 yards rushing to Abu Sama. What I'm more interested in, there was a play in this game where Jalen Knoll is in the slot, and he runs a little kind of skinny slant post route up right down the seam, and he houses it 79 yards for a touchdown. And this is what I'm looking at more so this year, because Iowa State hasn't run the ball this year quite as well as they have the last few years. Down the middle of the field. Iowa State's really good at throwing it. Kansas State really struggles to defend it. It's been a consistent problem for both of them. I'll start with Rocco Becht. 91 passing grade in the middle third of the field. All right, 10th best in the country. They take shots with Knoll and with Higgins down the middle, right? They don't do it maybe as often as some other teams, but when they get safety split and they throw it down the middle, they've been terrific. Jalen Knoll, second highest receiving grade among Power 4 receivers on these throws down the middle third of the field, only behind Tetero and McMillan. All right, Jaden Higgins, 9th best receiving grade in the Power 4. All right, down the middle of the field. You know who's one spot ahead of him? Jeremiah Smith. That's how good these two guys have been running down the middle of the field. All right, this is just you can go through, watch Iowa State tape, and you go. So many of their biggest plays, especially with Knoll, are just launched down the middle of the field or ripped into these zone windows on these slants inside from the slot from Knoll, and then Higgins also gets the job done in there too. Okay, Kansas State, middle third of the field coverage, 101st in coverage grade. All right. Outside the top 100 yards allowed per play, it's been a problem when you look at the types of passers that have given them problems, all right, and the better passers in the Big 12. We think about Jake Retzloff, we think about Shedeur Sanders, we think about Sam Levitt. All of these guys are really good at throwing down the middle of the field. Iowa State is really good at throwing down the middle of the field. This is the big concern for me. Kansas State, especially at safety, has struggled to not give up big plays right down the heart of their defense. And it's going to be a problem. I think they could defend the run better. I think they're going to defend the run better than I think it was 273 they gave up to Sama last year. Their run defense is a better part of their defense than coverage and pass rush, right? But they need to be able to cover down the middle, or Rocco and Jalen and Jaden are going to tee off on them right up the seams like Knoll did last year. And there was other one-on-one opportunities on the outside, too, they took advantage of. But I'm very worried about their middle-of-the-field coverage in this game.
It's a bad matchup for Kansas State's defense, and I think it's a bad matchup for Iowa State's defense as well, because this Kansas State rushing attack, Dawn, is nasty, and the Iowa State run D has not been great this year. So inherently, Iowa State runs a 3-3-5 defense, meaning 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. inherently designed to limit the opposition's ability to spread the field in the passing game, obviously with 3 linebackers and 5 DBs out there. On the flip side, it also leaves them a little shorthanded in run defense as well, with only 3 defensive linemen on the field. And also does not help that your superstar run defender, Caleb Bacon, your linebacker, he's only played 5 snaps this year due to a lower leg injury, and most likely would not be playing in this game either. So you're missing your star run defender, and you're already playing in a 3-3-5 defense. That combination has made them have the 120th best run defense grade this year. They are 114th in the country with 5.6 yards allowed per carry. Kansas State, their offense, we talk about time and time again whenever we preview this game, Kansas State game, is their run game. It's all about the run game for the Kansas State offense. They average 6.3 yards per carry, the 6th most in college football. DJ Giddens is tied for 8th among FBS running backs with 817 yards after contact. Avery Johnson is 3rd among Power 4 quarterbacks with 25 carries that went for 10-plus yards as well. So between DJ Giddens and Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards, who I think is banged up right now and probably won't be playing in this game, but still, when he is out there, he's dangerous as well. But with Giddens and Avery Johnson out there, it's one of the most dangerous rushing attacks we have in college football. I will say last week, we talked about it last week in the Iowa State-Utah review, they did a great job of shutting down the Utah ground game. And Utah, not only do they have a good running back in Mekhi Bernard, they have a dominant offensive line blocking for them as well, with Spencer Fano, obviously the right tackle leading the way. But Iowa State only allowed 109 rushing yards in that game. If they could do the same this week, they could have Avery Johnson could have a lot of issues in obvious passing downs, because Iowa State, with the 3-3-5 defense, they have the 10th best coverage grade in college football this year. I don't think this is a game where Avery Johnson can win with his arm. Kansas State, for them to win this game, they got to win with their dominant run game. And I think if I'm Iowa State, also stack the box in this game and dare Avery Johnson to throw into your great secondary with guys like Darian Porter leading the way in that secondary. Kansas State is going to want to run the ball in this game, and that's really the only avenue I think they can win this game, is if they really run the ball really well.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think you mentioned the right thing with Avery Johnson. And the one part of the game last week against Utah where they did give up yards on the ground was when Luke Batari came in at quarterback and started running, right? So now, and we talk about last year's game, they gave up 35 points to Kansas State with Will Howard at quarterback, not Avery Johnson. Right now it's Johnson, who is not the passer that Howard is, but he's a more dynamic runner, and the speed is a real problem. So it is, I think the option threat plays a part in that, because when you're playing Utah right now, you're talking about a 4th, 5th string quarterback in there, right? And you know where the ball's going in the run game. The whole point of the K-State run game is you don't know where it's going at any given moment. Now, it would help the Wildcats to have Dylan Edwards in this game. We'll see where that goes. He did get banged up last week, but either way, you mentioned it with Johnson and Giddens. It's always a threat. We know the formula with Kansas State. If you fall behind them early, you have a big problem.
And Dalton, you said before, time and time again, how Kansas State might be the hardest offense to play if you're a linebacker.
Yep.
And your superstar linebacker's out for basically the whole season. So bad matchup for Iowa State. So bad matchup for Kansas State's defense, bad matchup for Iowa State's defense. Dalton, what could be a shootout? Who will win this game and keep their Big 12 title hopes alive?
This is tough, but I'm stuck with the idea that last year Iowa State played they 15.6 yards per play. That's silly. Okay, they played the most efficient offensive game they absolutely possibly could have, and they still only won the game by 7. That worries me, because now if they go and have a normal day offensively, we're regressing to the mean here. If they have 15 yards of play in this game, they're obviously going to win again. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be very tense, even at Iowa State, with everything on the line. Kansas State, look, Chris Kleiman, he gets them playing hard every single week. This is not a question. We've only seen one game this year against BYU where they really laid down, right? They're not going to lay down by any means. They have their culture. They want to run the ball. And you know what? You mentioned it might be a 1% pulse, but they have a pulse in this with 3 losses. It's out, but Kansas State's always motivated to play. They can run the football. If they get ahead, this is a real problem. I am going to take the Wildcats 30-27. I think they got beat on their home field last year in a weird game. This game could be weird also, but they go on the road and steal one from the Cyclones.
All right. Actually, our guy, Argue Yeti, in the chat is saying that Kansas State has a 15% chance to make the title game. So
that high, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, I would think with all this, because they need at least, 3 teams? Well, they need 2 other teams to lose.
Yeah, and then a lot of tiebreakers to go. I don't know what the tiebreakers would entail.
I'm shocked it's that high. That's crazy.
Yeah.
15. Now I want to see what the 15%. Not now, because I know the producers got to get
They got to get home to their families, Dalton. You and I are the only bachelors out here just going home and watching more ball.
That's it. We're getting ready for next
Watching college basketball tonight, too. Big day college basketball tonight.
Hey.
But yeah, but listen, man, I am with you. I'm taking Kansas State in this game. I got them 35-34. I think it's a bad matchup for both defenses. But the difference is for me, Rocco Becht has been inconsistent all year. There's some really good games and some not so great games.
The pick sixes worry me.
Right. And
there's been big mistakes. Yeah.
I can't trust that he'll be great in this game. What I can trust, Kansas State run game can be great in this game. I have more faith in the ground game for Kansas State than I do in Iowa State's aerial attack. Even though I think both could really succeed in this game, but I have more faith in the Kansas State ground game in this kind of game. I think they'll win in a nail biter, and BYU fans and Colorado fans rejoice. So as of right now, Dalton, before we move to our final game, as of right now, we both have Kansas State pulling it off. We both have Colorado winning. We both have Arizona State winning. As of right now, Arizona State is in. Colorado is in. Big 12 title game. This game determines the other team. Arizona State is firmly in. They're in.
And it's the last game of the night.
It's the last game of the night.
10:15, I think it is.
10:15 p.m. Houston at BYU. Just kind of set the stage here for this preview. Colorado, with that result right there, Colorado is the biggest Houston fans on the planet. Because if Houston pulls it off, Colorado and Arizona State will meet in the Big 12 title game. However, if BYU wins this game, it'll be BYU and Arizona State in the title game, according to our predictions, at least for right now. So really, BYU, just go over what they need to do, and we kind of talked about it already, kind of happened in one of our predictions already. Win and Iowa State loses, or win and Arizona State loses. We already predicted Arizona State to beat Arizona, and we both predicted Iowa State to lose. So what has had to happen for BYU has happened. It's as simple as that. BYU just needs one of those two teams to lose. The Colorado game does not matter for BYU at all because they're already ahead of Colorado in the standings. So really, that game does not matter. They got to be Houston, though. And right, it was obviously had some the big results earlier this year. So BYU, their playoff hopes are still alive. Big 12 title hopes are still alive. They just need one of Iowa State and Arizona State to lose. So, Dawn, you have the Houston offense in this game. What should we be looking out for when they have the ball?
Okay, Houston's not a particularly high-scoring team. It's been a little better since they replaced Donovan Smith with Zion Chris, a quarterback, the Louisiana transfer. They, much like several of these teams we've talked about today, they want to run the football. That's not a question. With Chris as their quarterback, they're 3-3. He's their leading rusher in that span with 380 yards. It's over 5 yards a carry, okay, or nearly 5.5 yards a carry. In their 4 wins this year, they run for 220 yards a game. In their 7 losses, it's 120 yards a game. All right, this is where we're at. If they can, they don't throw the ball much. Even when they upset Kansas State, he threw 11 passes. Now he completed all 11 of them. That's cool, but they threw 11 passes and beat Kansas State. So they want to run the ball, and there's no question. What I found is that they want to run the ball between the tackles. Okay, 5.9 yards per carry between the tackles since Chris has been their starting quarterback. All right, BYU. This is something they really struggled with last year. They allowed almost 6 yards a carry. I think it was that same 5.9 number last year on runs between the tackles. This season, they've allowed the 11th fewest rushing yards between the tackles in the FBS. You're getting improvements from guys like Harrison Taggart at linebacker, Logan Latui on the defensive line. They have just, as a unit, Jay Hill, I got to give him a lot of credit. He's gotten several head coaching interviews, or he's going to get several head coaching interviews for some head coaching jobs in the Mountain West especially. Give him a lot of credit. This team's a lot more physical than they were last year between the tackles, and I've said over and over and over, the Big 12 is going to come down to run defense. And if BYU's run defense shows up in this game, Houston does not have a whole lot of other options. They have not scored very many points this season, and when they have, it's running the ball right down the middle, right between the tackles, controlling time of possession, and winning low-scoring games. BYU needs the run defense to show up in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other side of the ball, Dawn, BYU, can they finish drives, man? Honestly, BYU in the red zone has had some major issues this year. So against Kansas in that 17-13 loss, BYU had 4 trips to the red zone and only 6 points to show for it. They had a pick right before halftime on the goal line. They went for it late in the game when they had to go for it, really, and they came up short on that one as well. So 6 points to show for it on 4 trips to the red zone. If you really did the math, kicking 4 field goals would have won them the game. they would have won the game against them with the field goals. They would have won 19-17 over Kansas if that, of course, happened. Right now, Dalton, they have a 65.1 offensive grade in the red zone. That's 92nd in the country. They have a 59% touchdown percentage in the red zone. That's 87th in college football. So barely over half of their red zone trips resulted in a touchdown. However, Houston has the worst red zone defense in college football with a 53.9 red zone defensive grade so far this year. Houston has allowed points on 86% of red zone drives, which is 109th in the country, and they've allowed a touchdown on over 65% of their red zone drives, which is 92nd in America. So BYU's inability to finish drives has really been their biggest weaknesses of the offense all year. But Houston's defense is even worse in terms of standing tall when it matters most as well. So BYU finishing drives is the biggest matchup to watch, I think, in this game.
Yeah, if they can score touchdowns in this game, they will be fine, which sounds like an obvious thing to say. But for BYU, it was better in the first half of the year. They were, I think, their first 5 or 6 games, they were in the top, 30 or 40, I want to say, in offensive grade in the red zone. And then the last 4 or 5 games, I mean, it's been bad. It's been bottom 10 down there there's been turnovers, goal line fades, and things like that. Just not being able to finish, right? And that's what happened, especially against Kansas. That was really the signature game, like you mentioned, for that. If they finish drives, honestly, and BYU gets up to even at least 24 points in this game, they'll be fine. But if you keep kicking field goals or you have red zone turnovers, you keep teams in games, and that's how upsets happen, just like against Kansas.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, ultimately, will BYU win this game? And according to our predictions, it would be BYU versus Arizona State in the Big 12 title game. Or will Houston pull it off? And if Houston wins, according to our predictions, it would be Arizona State against Colorado for the Big 12 title.
Okay, so one of two things is going to happen here with BYU, and I don't think either of them is good for Houston. One, they're going to have a chance playing last among everybody at 10-15 on Saturday. They're going to have a chance to make the Big 12 title game at home, which is extremely motivating, right? Two, for various other circumstances, by then they could be out of it, right? And the tiebreakers and whatever else, whether they win or lose, right? They need other things to happen. They need Arizona State or Iowa State to lose. If they both win, they're done.
Yeah.
Right? So the other thing that could happen is they come in here and they're raging pissed off because they're not in the Big 12 title game after such a great season, and they take out all their anger on Houston. Either way, I think this is BYU's bounce-back game. Yeah. I think their run defense has been really good all year. I think it's going to show up regardless of the circumstance, and I think if nothing else, even if they get to be pissed off and go 10-2 and probably not get an at-large bid to the playoff and have at the end, it's a little bit disappointing considering they're 10-2, but they lost 2 really big games recently, and I think either way they're looking to bounce back and play good football against. I thought about it. I was going to say against the Cougars, but they're both Cougars. We have one of those situations. So BYU 35, Houston 13.
I got BYU 31, Houston 10. I think they will win a commanding game over Houston, and like I said, with Iowa State losing for us, they would be playing for a lot in this one. I don't think. The game will be ending right when this one's kicking off. So I don't know how aware the players would be of that result. I'm sure on the sideline there might be some whispers of, hey.
Now, if you're realistically, I know I put up those 2 scenarios as the mental states, but realistically, if you're Kalani Sitake, you're telling your team,
cut them off.
Who gives a shit? We have to go out here and play better football than we've played the last 2 or even the last 4 or 5 weeks. Get out here and smack this team, and whatever happens. Again, control your own fate. Now, them going last means they'll have a little more of an eyeball on it maybe, or at least the fans will, and they'll be aware of it. And especially if one of those 2 loses, then you'll be really charged up in Provo. But one way or the other, they need to bounce back for themselves and come out and play good football because they really haven't the last 2 weeks.
So we both have BYU winning and both have Iowa State winning, or Iowa State losing, which means it'll be BYU against Arizona State in the Big 12 title game, and Dalton, according to our other predictions, it would be Miami against SMU in the ACC title game. It would be Texas against Georgia in the SEC title game. And it would be Oregon against Ohio State in the Big 10 title game as well. Unbelievable conference championship matchups that we'll have next week as well. Let's get into our upset picks, though, Dom, before we wrap up with our Jim Nagy interview at the very end as well. So update the standings real quick before we get out of here. Dawn, you have about a 106-point lead on me right now. You have 957 points on the year. I have 851. Eli is 780. If you don't want to understand how the point totals added up, we're picking a team based on the money line to win outright. And whatever the money line is, you get that point total if they win. So if the team is plus 200 to win, you get 200 points if they win in an upset. So, Dalton, you start off because you're in the lead right now. What is your upset pick of the week?
All right, so the Army Black Knights obviously lost their first game of the year last week against Notre Dame. And it's a tough loss, right? I mean, it is what it is. It's Notre Dame, and they're already locked into the American title game. But tough opponent in UTSA this week, and UTSA is actually a 7-point underdog. But let me tell you something, their offense is blazing hot. Owen McCown at quarterback.
Woo!
We've got another NFL son at quarterback in Owen McCown. Leads the American in passing grade, and UTSA, they have won 4 of their past 5 games and have scored 38 points in all 5 of those games. The one loss was a shootout with Tulsa. Army is starting to see some struggles scoring. UTSA is scoring in bunches. Give me the Roadrunners at plus 205 over Army.
All right, I will be going with West Virginia plus 142 over Texas Tech, which actually matters for a lot of these Big 12 contenders. This is one of those games where it does actually matter for a lot of these teams. I'm going West Virginia in the upset. I think Texas Tech's secondary has had a lot of issues all year. I like what Garrett Green has done. It's been a little disappointing for West Virginia overall. And the other thing too, Dawn, is to attack the West Virginia defense, you have to attack their secondary, which has been really bad this year. Baron Morton is really hot and cold. I can't trust that he's going to have a great game.
He ain't just hot and cold. He's lava and ice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real hot or real cold. It's. I don't know that there's a bigger roller coaster at quarterback than him.
I think I could trust Garrett Green a little bit more. So I'm taking the Mountaineers to beat the Red Raiders in that Big 12 game. Eli, it looks like you have another Big 12 game that you're going with this week.
Another Big 12 game. Give me the hometown Cincinnati Bearcats over TCU at plus 140. Trying to get myself into striking range going into next week. Just think 140 is good for a home dog.
Yeah, I like it. Cincinnati, hometown team as well. I like it over TCU, and that's also an important game. There are some scenarios that involve Cincinnati and TCU's game as well. I think for the Arizona State is one of them that they need, I think, TCU to lose in order for that to be okay for them.
Somewhere in there.
Something
Something
ridiculous.
I didn't get them all memorized, especially with Arizona State and all of that. But the Big 12 is... it's nothing short of a circus.
Yeah, honestly, if you want to, because we already forgot it as well, because there's so many scenarios. If you want to just go back, rewind, and check out the great full screens that Eli and Tyler made back there, just to kind of get a grasp of what is a chaotic Big 12 right now. But yeah, Donald, that's what we got for our Week 14 preview show. Got a Week 14 review show coming out on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. I want to wish all of our listeners and all of our viewers very happy Thanksgiving and enjoy an amazing weekend of college football. But we're not done yet, because we just interviewed earlier today the executive director of the Senior Bowl in Jim Nagy, who hosts, obviously, is the biggest all-star game on the circuit. Here's our interview with Jim Nagy. We have a very, very special guest on right now, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, joining the show right now. Jim, I just told you, Dalton and I will officially be going to Mobile. We are so pumped about that very, very soon for the first time ever for both of us. So thank you for having us, first of all, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Good to have a couple first-timers down here. We're looking forward to it.
I can't wait. I heard the bar scene after practices in Mobile is something to behold. So I'm very excited about that as well. But obviously the practices in the game is going to be unbelievable to watch. Jim, first thing I want to talk about, though, just the process of the Senior Bowl scouting for you guys. I know for you, I talked to you before, and you're like, man, we have like hundreds of guys preseason that we're looking at going into the regular season. Just how insane is that whole process for you and your entire scouting department, just kind of figuring out what players you're going to want to eventually invite to the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about that bar scene. Never. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never partaken in that ever. But yeah, the process, it's exhaustive, man. We started watching this year's class really last January before last year's game. I mean, there's no sense spinning your wheels in the office watching guys that are already committed to the game when you've got a roster set. So it's been I don't know, 10, 11 now they've been working on this class, and we'll evaluate all these FBS level guys, and then the FCS guys. Any starter at the FBS level we'll watch, put our eyes on in the spring, rewatch them again in the fall, kind of with a clean slate, and then the FCS Division II guys will just go through like All-American, all conference lists. And a lot of times what happens with the small school guys is, buddies around the league will give us a heads up at the beginning of the fall when they start going through the small schools. They'll just be like, hey, Jim, you got to get your eyeballs on this guy. I mean, there's no way we would have found Quinn Miners at Wisconsin Whitewater a few years back without the help of the guys in the NFL. So it's obviously everything we do is a big collaborative process. But here we are. We're got about 50 guys on the roster, so it's coming together.
Jim, I was curious actually about those small school guys and your process for finding those. You send scouts to all of the college games, but especially those small schools. You get to watch them at all in person and get to know them when really there's not a whole lot of exposure for those guys. Obviously, not a lot of national TV coverage and not a lot of scouting buzz while the FBS and all the playoff race and all the noise is going on up top. What is your process of really digging in on those small school guys during the season?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do try to get our eyeballs on those small school guys just because it's a big man's league and you really want to see what these guys look like. The tape might be the tape, but I think the body type part is a really underrated part of scouting. So, again, that's been the goal with kind of what we've done over the last 7 years, posting those videos every Saturday with our scouts. It's kind of become our trademark, but it's helpful to me. That's why we get up close on these guys. For me, I got to see the body type. And then obviously showing up at a small school game like that, you get a lot of time during pregame to connect with the coaching staff and see how these guys are wired. I probably made some mistakes my first year here, really not drilling down with the coaching staffs at the small schools to figure out which guys could handle this environment. I mean, you guys will see it when you're down here. It is highly competitive. There's a lot of anxiety for all these guys. Like when I was up at Alabama A&M last week, talking to Carson Vincent, their big left tackle, I told him, I said, you're going to be nervous. Like there's going to be nerves, but it's the same way for the guys with the Bama helmets and the Georgia helmets too. So don't let it overwhelm you. But so that's a big part of it is when we go out to the games is connecting with the people at the schools and trying to figure out if these guys will be able to handle the week.
So you mentioned Quinn Miners already as a guy that obviously went to the Senior Bowl, blew up from there. He actually was the highest graded offensive guard in the NFL this past week. Are there any other small school guys that you're really proud of, being really first on them, inviting them to the Senior Bowl, and now watching them blossom into really NFL stars at the next level?
I don't know. I mean, all of them, man. I mean, going back over the time, I mean, some of the guys are easy. Like the Cody Mauks and the Trevor Pennings. I mean, those guys were pretty easy evals. I don't know. I mean, I'm just happy. Proud's not even the right word. I'm just happy for these guys when they get to the next level and have success because they're realizing their dream. I mean, this is a great platform, for those guys. I mean, I think that they jump higher than anybody. Like Christian Watson a few years ago came down here as a 4th or 5th round pick based off all our calls around the league, and he had some drop issues at North Dakota State. I was a little worried about bringing him here and having the drop snowball on him, but he had a great week. As soon as he got the invite, I was talking to his agent the other day. As soon as he got the invite, he got on the jugs machine every day between he got the invite and coming to Mobile, and he caught everything that week and ended up the 36th pick in the draft. That's a major jump. It's a lot of money. Troy Anderson, the linebacker from Montana State a few years ago, teams mostly had him in the 5th and the 6th round, and he went, I think, 40th overall, something like that, somewhere in the 2nd to the Atlanta Falcons. So those are life-changing jumps for those guys, and it's cool to see them go on as pros and become good NFL players.
I like that you mentioned the high anxiety and the environment of the practices, especially when you talk about now we're in a time of year in college football where we're getting to the final weeks of the season, conference title games, playoff games, right? And obviously there's going to be more teams involved, but I'm curious, how much do you and even NFL scouts take into account the high-pressure environments, right, and guys performing in playoff games? We've seen the last couple of years where C.J. Stroud performed against Georgia very well in a national semifinal, and his draft stock went up. Michael Penix Jr. against Texas last year. How much in the whole process is taken into account, maybe not in the selection process, but the evaluation process of evaluating these guys in high-pressure environments?
It's huge. It's huge, especially for the quarterbacks. You're not drafting these guys to win in the regular season. I mean, obviously you have to do that to get to the playoffs, but you're drafting these quarterbacks to win playoff games. And so, yeah, a lot of these guys, I mean, you look at this class, if Georgia gets in, there's some really big opportunities for Carson Beck. If Texas gets in, there's a lot of, big stage games left for Quinn Ewers. So, yeah, it's huge, man. I mean, that's it. It's rivalry games, big stage games, night games in hostile environments. Those are the games that teams really dig into. I mean, when I spoke to the team at Michigan back in August, I told them, like, last year's group of Michigan players, I mean, you could have thrown out the first eight weeks of the season. You know, they didn't really play on any games that NFL would be interested in evaluating. Now, they played Penn State, Ohio State, Big Ten championship, and the run through the playoffs. So, yeah, by the end of it, the NFL had a lot of good tape to watch. But those are really the games, especially for the QBs and you know, some skill players. You know, you always want to see receivers kind of step up in big moments. So, yeah, it's those are really meaningful.
You mentioned the quarterbacks stepping up in big moments. Well, one quarterback who likely will play in a playoff game this year is Cam Ward, who, by all accounts, we think has been the best quarterback in college football this year. He will be going to the Senior Bowl, which we're very, very excited about seeing him out there. When you watch Cam Ward, even when you talk to him in person, because I actually interviewed him at the gym, and he was an amazing interview. He's a hilarious kid. What do you like about him as a person and on the football field? What makes Cam Ward so special, in your opinion?
I had a chance to meet Cam and his parents 2 summers ago at the Manning camp. Spent about a couple hours with his mom and dad while Cam was out on the field doing the counselor thing with some kids. And first off, he comes from a great family. You know, he's well raised. Just getting to meet the parents, so that's a big deal. You know, and then I'm close with those guys down at Miami. You know, Mario Cristobal and Shannon Dawson. Those guys, they rave about the guy. They rave about what he's done with their culture down there at Miami. The immediacy in which he kind of flipped things down there in his leadership. So obviously those are really cool things. I think when you dig into Cam's background, and he and I talked about this when I was there a couple of weeks ago to do that in-person invite. I mean, he's been at Incarnate Word, he's been at Washington State, he's been at Miami. That's 3 really different regions of the country that he's led football teams in. So those are 3 different locker rooms. There's a lot of diversity there. A lot of different guys he's been around. Similar last year to Bo Nix when he's in a locker room in the SEC at Auburn to being up the Pacific Northwest at Oregon. They're different locker rooms. So you grow as a leader in those situations. And I think the biggest thing for Cam this year on the field, on tape, is that at least for me, can't speak for anyone else. I just seen him work more in a pro style system. I mean, that was tough tape last year to watch in the air raid. It wasn't apples to apples by any sense. So again, you loved all the off-script stuff that he did. He clearly has some magic to him when he's running around and finding open guys. And you know, but this year he's playing more on time. He's playing more from the pocket, which is I think what NFL guys want to see. Everyone knew he could run around and do those things. But so yeah, I would say, you know, and then he's got a ton of arm talent. I mean, I just got done watching him upstairs. I was just watching some later stuff on a couple of his wide receivers and. You know, some of the arm angle stuff, and it's impressive. So, yeah, he's had a great year. I'm happy for Cam. He made a good decision by staying in last year. He was not nearly in this position last year to be a draftable prospect. Most teams had him in the 5th and 6th round. That's why we didn't extend an invite last year to the Senior Bowl. And now he's played his way. I don't know how far up, but he's played his way up quite a bit. So, just happy for him.
I agree, and look, Max and I got to see him at Louisville, and we were on the field watching and we just noticed his whole demeanor was just so calm and cool, even through adversity. He's got a certain quiet swagger about him where you feel like he's just never rattled. Do you look for players, or does it really make a difference to you when you see these guys in Mobile when they have just that calm demeanor about them, right? And I know we talked about the big games already, but is that a big part, especially for quarterbacks, so really at any position, and there's certain positions that require more leadership, right? Centers and middle linebackers and safeties. Is that sort of leadership the type of thing that NFL scouts are looking for too, where it's just, okay, things are going to be hard, it's a weird environment, none of us have played together before, and just being able to adapt? You mentioned Cam playing for 3 different teams. Well, you know, the Senior Bowl is a whole different team with a bunch of guys you've never played against, and you're doing it for all of a week, right? So where does that fall on the scale of what NFL evaluators are looking for? Is that leadership in kind of adaptable environments?
Well, yeah, I mean, you talk about his poise and his calm. I mean, those things are obvious when you watch Cam. I mean, he's got, as an old scouting friend of mine used to say, he's got the right central nervous system. And I always love stealing that line from him. But Cam's got that. He's super cool. And then the leadership part, I think the best example down here in Mobile has been Justin Herbert. There was a lot of BS out there before Justin came down here that he was too introverted to lead a locker room and things of that nature. And we put Justin in a lot of situations that week, whether it was up on stage in front of 20,000 people downtown for the concert we do, or, you know, up in front of his teammates at certain things, just trying to put him in certain situations and the league really saw Justin connect. It was really cool. Like after the game, there was one particular shot that the NFL Network captured after the game that I saw, the week after when I'm rewatching the stuff on TV. And it was post game, and it was everyone on the field. I mean, both teams, big, small, black, white, poly. I mean, whatever kind of guy there was on the field, like they're all coming up to Justin after, and congratulating him, hugging him. So there's something about Justin, even though he wasn't like, a huge personality. There was something about him that attracted the guys to him. So, and I think we saw that last night, just the leadership he showed in his post-game press conference, talking about Quentin Johnson and the struggles he had last night. Like, he's a real leader. So those are the things that to me, when I talk to the players, those are the kind of things you can show to these NFL guys in person, down on the practice field, at the game that they're not going to see on the college tape.
Jim, I'll get you out on this. So looking at this quarterback class this year, one thing that really stood out to me is just how old it is, honestly. There's really only one true junior that I think probably could come out, and that's Drew Aller from Penn State. Everyone else is in their fourth year, their fifth year, or even some guys in their sixth year of college football. Do you think it's kind of a trend that's going to continue in the NFL draft with guys staying in school longer, wanting to develop longer in college? Because you're seeing now in the NFL, you don't get much time in the NFL to prove you can be a franchise quarterback before you get benched, right? So do you think it's kind of a trend we're going to see more of, or do you think it's kind of a one-off thing versus the 2025 NFL draft?
No, 100%. No, I think it's definitely going to be a trend. It would have mattered back in the day when we couldn't bring juniors to the Senior Bowl. Now it doesn't really matter. We can bring them all. So I would have loved the pre-junior rule, keeping these guys in school. But no, you're right. I mean, that's the bottom line. They're getting thrown out there whether they're ready or not. And they're not getting those developmental reps. So they're going to have to get them somewhere, hopefully in college. I mean, you just look at what Bo Nix is doing right now. I mean, a lot of snarky people were saying a lot of dumb shit last year on social media about Bo and his age and all that, but I think he's getting the last laugh right now. I mean, those starts matter, and I think that's like you just take Garrett Nussmeier right now, and he's super talented. Really believe in the guy's arm talent. I mean, it's unbelievable. But he's going to be in a situation where he has to decide whether to come out. And if he does, I think he'll be near the top of this class, if not at the top of the class when it's all said and done, or go back and just get those reps. And his dad his dad's a Senior Bowl alum, was a really good player himself, and lifer coach. They're gonna make the smart decision. So for Garrett to go back and get another year of starts at the college level, I think might be the smartest thing. But yeah, certainly I think you're going to see more guys stay in school and kind of log those starts and log that experience. It goes back to the old Bill Parcells model where you wanted to have 30 career starts. I think a lot of teams got away from that. And if you look back over the last, 5, 10, 15 years, the guys that were thrown out on the field without a lot of college games, I mean, it hasn't gone well. So I certainly think it's going to be a trend.
Yeah, especially the NIL nowadays, too. There's a financial reason to stay in school for a lot of these guys as well. But Jim,
absolutely.
We have a ton more questions to ask you, but we are fortunate enough to have you on for another couple episodes as well. So we'll save those questions for later on. But I want to take the time to really appreciate you coming on the show right now. It was always great to talk to you. And I can't wait to see you in a month for the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, we'll roll out the red carpet, guys. Hey, thanks for having me on, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Jim. You too.